Will the September 4th, 2013 meeting of the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission please come to order? Thank you all for your attendance this evening. For the benefit of those present who may not have participated in a P&Z meeting, I will review our public hearing procedure, which is as follows. We will read the legal notice for the public hearing portion of this meeting as published in the local newspaper. The applicants will then be invited to come forward and present their case, explaining to the commission and the public what is specifically being requested of the subject property. Written comments from town agencies pertaining to the application will then be read into the record if the commission has received any. The commissioners will then ask their clarifying questions, and then the public will be invited to ask any questions they have about the application. I will then ask those in attendance who support the application to please come forward and make their statement, and then I will ask those in attendance who oppose the application to please come forward and make their statement regarding the application. As this is a public hearing, it will be necessary for those coming forward to ask questions or to speak for or against any application to please identify themselves and state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding. At the conclusion of all statements from the public and the applicants, I will close the public hearing on each application. The applicant and the public are then free to leave or remain for the balance of the hearings and the regular meeting, at which time the commission will discuss each application under consideration and try to reach a decision. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decisions of this commission. The applicant and/or any aggrieved party with legal standing will have the right to appeal this decision to Superior Court within the statutory timeframe if they so desire. All decisions reached at this meeting will be available to the public the next day by either visiting or calling the Planning and Zoning Office after 9:30 a.m. Seated this evening are the following Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission members. David Grigsby, Walter Corbiere, I'm Ray Bauer, Tom Kloss, Peter Golitz, Frank DeAndrea. Town staff present this evening, George Crowell, Town Planner, and Reggie Reed, the Zoning Enforcement Officer. The videographer this evening is Shannon Gale, and our recording secretary this evening is Donette. Will the secretary please read the legal notice?
Legal notice, Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on September 4th, 2013 at 7:30 p.m. at the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, Monunketuck Rooms, 2nd floor, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, for the following purposes. Number 1, Agriculture Society. Property located at 111 Lovers Lane, map 40, lot 138, zone R3. Special permit for 2 barns. Table 4, line 16, agricultural facility. Number 2, Sullivan Farm, LLC. Property located at Boston Post Road, map 83, lot 5, zone R7. Zoning map revision to change the approximately 35-acre parcel from R7 zone to TS2 zone. Number 3, amend 273-2 word usage definitions. Miscellaneous word definitions included in Table 5 of the zoning code. Number 4, amend Table 5 permitted uses in non-residential districts. Comprehensive revision of Table 5 in order to eliminate inconsistencies, update language, and generally conform with the intent of the various non-residential zoning districts and the Plan of Conservation and Development. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the Office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communications will be received. Dated at Guilford, Connecticut, this 15th day of August 2013, Ray Bauer, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. Okay, we'll get right to it. The first application we'll hear this evening is the Agricultural Society, property located at 111 Lovers Lane. This is a special permit to allow 2 barns. George, I believe all the notice issues have been resolved, so we're ready to go forward with the public hearing this evening. Great. Okay.
Since the last,
Excuse me, name and address the facts.
Barb Hamlin, Assistant Secretary for Guilford Ag Society, live at 130 Crooked Hill Road, North Guilford.
Thank you very much. Please begin.
Um,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Brian Bailey, 175 Dirt Road.
Great, thank you.
Since the last couple meetings, we asked Eric Anderson to go down and clean up the site plan and everything, so we have something that is real.
Okay, thank you.
We do have 2 pole barns for the property. One of them is enclosed, the other is a pavilion. They're both 40 by 120s, and which is the same size as the tents that we rent every year. These will replace 2 of the tents that we're renting in hopes that over time it'll start to save us some money. The enclosed building is going to be for storage of all the props, et cetera, that we utilize for the fair, plus equipment that we have that we've invested in and are trying to maintain. The other building is also going to be, for this year, it's going to be the arts and crafts tent for the fair. And I know in our application, we said from time to time it would be utilized otherwise. The events that are down the fairgrounds at this point in time, many of them, Lobster Fest, Taste of the Shoreline, so on and so forth, have to rent some tents to have their event. This would eliminate one tent for these organizations as well. Basically, we took the permit out. I filled out the building permits, paid the fees, et cetera, and then found out after the fact that we needed to go for a special permit. We weren't aware of that at the time. The buildings were ordered, they were coming from Pennsylvania, and we couldn't get on the docket in enough time before they were to be delivered.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to state at this time?
Basically, I think that what I basically said is the facts of what, what we're doing.
Okay,
at this point.
we'll open it then for questions from the commissioners. First one I have is the one that's the pavilion. Will that be available for rent from the public, or to be used by other entities? More, in other words, will there be more use than we have today at that location?
Basically, I don't handle the rentals
Okay.
type of thing, so I do know that we don't want to utilize it every weekend. Our group can't maintain the grounds to utilize it every weekend,
Okay.
okay? We try to be cognizant of what we're doing down there and the surroundings and that,
Okay.
and we do feel who goes in there,
All right.
very much so.
Other questions from the commissioners?
You ordered these barns from Pennsylvania,
Franklin Builders, yes.
and did you think, and what were your, what went into your decision-making to choose those particular barns from you?
Because they have built other barns in this town already, and they've also built barns in Northford, et cetera, and they are licensed in Connecticut, and their craftsmanship is fantastic.
Other questions from the commissioners at this time? Okay, I'll go to the public. This is an opportunity to ask questions, not to make a statement for or against. We'll get to that, but to just ask questions to clarify any issues you may have with the application. Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? Okay, sir. Name and address, please.
Roger Lane, 196 Whitfield. These extensive structures could, obviously they mean a revision to the special permit because they substantially change the site. But they could be a sort of halving of increased density of use of the site.
Do you have a question, sir? I'm just...
Yes, so is that,
Was that the intention of putting these up?
Yeah.
No. No. That was not the intention of putting these up. As I stated, we're renting tents every year to put a fair on, and it has been in the plan since 1989 to start putting some structures up to help us save on the renting of the tents. I know to get right off the bat, it doesn't save, but in the long run it will. The rental, as you're questioning, basically there's already events that have been held there for many years.
But although the current intentions of the Agricultural Society may not be to use the site more intensively, I mean, who's to say that the minds may change or people may change in the Agricultural Society, and in future they may want to do that. I mean, what's to stop that?
I believe that in order for us to do something like that, just as the Dudley Farm did, we would have to have a revision to the special permit that we have.
George, just so we're clear, the current special permit doesn't allow anything that is ancillary to the events that are currently held there, right? I just want to make sure we're clear to what extent is permitted
You have a
today.
copy of the special permit that was issued in 1989.
So maybe we could just read that aloud so everybody's on the same page.
What it says is that the uses of this property be limited to agricultural fairs, craft shows, auto shows, and similar activities of a nonprofit nature, and that musical events, including concerts, are expressly prohibited except as accessory to one of the above activities.
So to the extent you want to modify that, you'll have to come back for a modification to the special permit. So they're not allowed to do anything that is not allowed by what you just heard. Okay?
Wasn't there a jazz festival there for several years?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what?
Wasn't there a jazz festival for several years on the fairgrounds?
Yes,
Yeah.
that was
How did that fit in?
nonprofit.
I guess that would have to have been considered a similar activity of a nonprofit nature.
Is the Renaissance Fair a non-profit activity?
Good question, I suspect.
I didn't quite hear your statement.
Is the Renaissance Fair
Oh,
a
Renaissance.
non-profit activity? I believe it's for profit, isn't it?
I don't know.
How would we know? Well, we could ask the people who rent the
Yeah.
land.
I personally, David, I don't know because I'm not the one that's handling the contract. Is Morgan?
Bill Lombard, 37 Lombard's Lane. I don't want to sound coy about this. Yes, it is a nonprofit. Has it been a profit? No. It has not done particularly well.
Do that one more time.
I'm sorry?
Did you say it was a nonprofit or a for-profit?
It is a for-profit.
For-profit.
It was, yes.
Okay, it just hasn't necessarily made a whole lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. I was just,
Okay. So
The jazz festival would appear to be, sounds like it's a musical event.
yeah, well, it's not happening now.
No, right.
But I mean, I think the question sounds as if what they're, the question or the concern is that I gather that people are saying by buildings being permanent as opposed to having the investment cost of having to rent the tent. Maybe that dissuades you from doing it too frequently, but if you built the building, is there the risk that you will then be more intensively using the property, either A, because it's easier, or because you don't have to bother to rent the tent, or B, you've invested in these buildings and you have to pay for them. So I gather the concern is that this will lead to more intensive use of the property.
One of the other things that I will mention that most of the events that have been held at the fairgrounds have either been town events, town or community organization, nonprofit events, and school events that have actually taken place down here. Problem being is that they don't have places that can hold the parking, hold the amount of people as that facility can. So I think we've opened up our property to allow the schools to have road races down there and things like that. So we are looking at the community and supporting the community as well. And yes, you're right, it does, I mean, it's not just to pay for the buildings. Do you mind if I, Larry?
Go ahead.
Could you just mention the costs of our operations, why we do things?
Larry Leet, 10 Horseshoe Road. I'm the treasurer for the Guilford Agricultural Society. On a typical year, our operating expenses at the fairgrounds run over $250,000. anywhere generally from about $250,000 to $275,000, $280,000, depending on what we book for entertainment. The tents that we rent cost us close to $30,000 a year. Those are the kind of costs that we're trying to cover. The other thing that we need to take into consideration as a nonprofit that throws our biggest fundraising event in 3 days in the middle of hurricane season is we're trying to diversify our earnings. By allowing us to rent the fairgrounds and having this building, we'll be able to rent it, but not, it's a double-edged sword here. We may be able to rent it more often, but because we've got the building, our fees are going to go up. So it's going to lower the uses that are going to be there anyway. But all we're trying to do is diversify our income sources out of hurricane season and use it throughout the summer. And we typically don't see an awful lot of rental revenue, but in our case, we were broke 7-8 years ago. The additional $14,000 to $15,000 a year we see in off-season rentals helps pad our revenue stream just a bit. And it's for us, every dollar is helpful.
Okay.
I know a lot of us are, sort of know what events happen there. Could you mention the town and school events that have occurred recently in the last year or two?
I think Gil can discuss that better.
We've had the Adams Road Race every year. We had a shoreline meet there this year. Jim Ford has booked 4 races this fall, beginning middle of September, I think it is. Quite often, some of the schools will back out on their races and they'll cancel them. But we've averaged 2 or 3 races a year. We have the Taste of Guilford, Taste of Shoreline, whichever, the Lobster Fest. Let's see, what else? The fireworks is a big draw there. They get, I don't know, what did we say? Something like, I think we parked 1,300 cars in that lot the night of the fireworks. So we've always been very conscious of the people around us, and this isn't time, I know, this is questions, but I'll have something to say later on if I may.
Okay. Any other questions from the public? Sir?
Perugini, 200 Whitfield Street. I guess I'd like to understand the process, the review process that goes on to ensure the events that are being placed at the fairgrounds are actually not-for-profits, as that is what's in the special permit and the current usage. And I'd also like to understand the number of current events. I live there, I've heard them, but I'm curious as to the number of current events that are scheduled and what the increase has been in the number of events over the last 5, say, years versus the previous 5 years.
They're about the same. They've changed a bit from one to the other, drop one, get one, but there's been a very nominal increase. If you want to say a percentage, it's probably a high percentage because there's so few events there. But I think there were maybe, I'm not going to count the races as events, but there were maybe 5 or 6 total events. And I apologize, I brought the wrong rent book. This is mine instead of the one for the fair. But it has not increased substantially at all.
With regard to ensuring that the events conform to what's in the special permit, do you have anybody who screens the requests that come in or anything like that? I'm just to answer that gentleman's question.
Well, basically, Gil will get the inquiry on it, and it usually goes to the board of directors.
Okay. And they ensure that it conforms to what the permit requires or allows.
So we have testimony that it didn't.
The other, yeah.
Well, that's why I just want to.
Perhaps the question partly is directed to the town. Do we have any kind of procedure for reviewing proposed events and to determine whether they comply with this somewhat vague statement of uses allowed? The answer is no.
Okay.
And as long as the uses would fall under agricultural fair, craft show, auto show, or similar activities of a nonprofit nature, the intensity is not regulated under this special permit. They could, as long as it's a fair or a craft show or an auto show, they could have them every weekend if they wanted to. because our special permit is not regulating intensity. It's if they change the nature and perhaps have a for-profit organization there, they would be either in violation of the special permit or they would need to seek
I think that's a
modification.
fair reading of the regulation.
Yeah, I agree with
Yep.
that.
Right, the other thing that I wanted to
Sure.
mention is, are any of our events that have been held there are pretty much just April through October. The rest of the year, the grounds are not utilized and they're left open. I know that there's one exception that will be happening this year because of the 375th. The town, the 375th committee has requested to utilize the grounds New Year's Eve for fireworks.
Okay,
So that would be the only exception to that rule.
okay. Yes, ma'am.
Kathy Mack, 212 Richfield Street. I have a question for George Cross. Did you ever review permits and to make sure they're being followed? Is that sometimes a function of your office, or is this who enforces special permits?
I'm sorry.
Who enforces special permit? If there's special permit conditions on, who's responsible for enforcing it?
We are, the town, the planning and zoning office.
I mean, a lot of times where they get enforced is when some citizen complains to the zoning enforcement officer that there's been a violation. Then Reggie will go out and investigate, get the facts, and if there is, then there's a process that is pretty well documented, cease and desist order, appeals, et cetera, that they can go through. And if the violation isn't remedied, there could be fines levied by the town as well. So I think to answer your question, most of the ones I've been involved in have been as a result of a complaint from a resident of town about something taking place in the property that they don't feel was allowed or isn't allowed. That goes to Reggie, and then she investigates it. Any other questions at this time?
The only other comment I want to make
Sure.
to let the people know is from time to time, we have had requests from neighbors to utilize our parking lot if they're having some type of event at their home. And we have granted that as
Okay.
well. So people see a bunch of cars on the grounds and wonder why sometimes that does happen.
Okay, appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Just quick on it, if I remember, if people saw, they might think it's terrible, but they see a bunch of crunch cars and firemen running around. We also allow the fire department every year to do their demonstration or their training for oil spills, for tractor-trailer accidents and such.
Okay.
They do that, I think, twice, 2 different days a year on there.
Okay, thank you. Well, why don't we, back to questions, but why don't we start now with those who'd like to make a statement in favor of the application? In order to do this most efficiently, maybe you can just come up here, identify yourselves for the camera and make your statement, and then go back. What we would ask is whether the statement's for or against. If somebody's already made the same point, please don't repeat it, but go on to any new points you'd like to make. So, anyone liking to speak in favor of the application? Sir, why don't we start with you?
Gil Lombard, 37 Lovers Lane. I've been a lifelong resident of Guilford, which will be 70 years this month. My wife and I built our home at Lovers Lane in 1970, knowing the Guilford Fair was there. Back when the Governor's Foot Guard used to race up and down the fields checking the fences. We've never had a problem with it. The noise actually is more pleasurable than some of the cars going up and down the road. We enjoy it there. We enjoy all the events there, and they've been very good neighbors. Back in probably 1980, I decided to join the organization. My wife and I are life members right now. And if you've seen the mowing, my wife and I do an awful lot of that along with everyone else. One of the big things of the Ag Society is that there is no one that gets paid a nickel for doing this. We get somewhere around 22,000 people a year. I think we put on one heck of an event. We have top name people there, and I think it's an event that everyone should be proud of. The events that we have there, as Larry said, we need some money there. We had a real bad year and had to borrow 6 figures from the bank one year to put the fair on. And we climbed out of that and finally put a little war chest together to be able to put 2 barns up. I was skeptical myself. I have to look at them every day through the window, and I was surprised to see that they fit in just beautifully. As a matter of fact, the 2 red-tailed hawks sit on the top of them, so they haven't been too scared. You know Peter, right? And they have babies too. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Sir.
Board, right, sure. Peter Palumbo, 120 Lovers Lane. My wife and I have lived there about 8 years, and we also do enjoy what goes on at the fairgrounds. We've seen, I just asked, actually, this is about the permit for the 2 buildings, correct?
Yes.
Got it. And I'm speaking in favor of the 2 buildings being erected on the property. I think that the Ag Society chose a good spot for them. And I think they found the right spot in that property. And yes, those hawks now have a new little home there.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Sir.
Brian McClone, resident 622 Mulberry Point Road, and also the Economic Development Coordinator for the town. I'm not a neighbor of that of the fairgrounds, but I've utilized the fairgrounds on numerous occasions. I am supporting the barns. I think the fairground has done with the entrance barn or area that they've put in, they've done with a lot of class. It fits into the character. This is effectively farmland or looking like farmland, and the barns, to me, accent that. I look at this somewhat as an asset to our town, and if you look at the beach, the trails, the museums, the attractions, this is one of the things people do come to town to see and participate in for various things, fairs, car shows, and so on. So any improvements like this that they can make, I think, improves the attractiveness and people's desire to come back and utilize these spaces. Might it, I shouldn't even get involved, might it increase rental activity? If it does, I would say good. That would be a good thing for the town, because when people here are using these, they come to the rest of the town as well for restaurants, shops, retailing, and support our overall community. So I'd like to support this project.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Sir.
My name is Bill Shank. I live at 115 Boston Street. So we have an unobstructed view to the fairgrounds right behind the tractor pull area. My wife and I and kids really enjoy the activities there. If there's a concern about activities with the new barns, as far as the volume, the intensity, we enjoy it. We sit in our backyard. If there's an ad hoc concert there that we didn't know about, we listen to people joust. We see all the colors from the Ferris wheel. We invite friends over for the fireworks. On the other side of our house, we have road races going down 146. We have 2 parades. People come over for the parades. We built a lovely home that we lived in for 10 years on Garrison Drive off Little Meadow Road, which was a cul-de-sac. Very quiet, very different. There's a lot of different parts in town. We came downtown for activity. We came on downtown for hearing the liveliness of the town, and whether it's on the Guilford Green or on the fairgrounds, we would hate to see too much restrictive ordinances imposed upon people that would come to town. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yvette McIntyre, 120 Lovers Lane. I'm not sure if I'm speaking in favor or against, so I thought this was a good time. I am in favor of the wonderful job that they've done with the barns. They look really nice out my front window. I don't have an objection to that. My only concern with the barns is if there are events that go on for weeks, as the Renaissance Fair does, And also with camping on the property, when the Renaissance Fair goes on, tends to be, from what I've seen, people do camp out there. And I would hate to see an increase in that sort of activity with the new barns.
Okay. All right, anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the application? Sir?
I know there's a letter that was submitted on behalf of...
Yes, Marge Shansky, Attorney Shansky, did submit a letter to us.
Is that going to be read by the commission into the record, or...
No, if you want to read it, you're welcome to it. I guess Kathy Mack, Peter...
It's long.
Yes, it is long, that's why, but we do have it in front of us, and it is part of the record.
We all read it.
We read it.
We've read it all.
I mean, we're only concerned that if it doesn't get read, it doesn't get into the record.
No, it'll be,
It is in the record.
Okay.
It's in the record, but if somebody would like to make comment on the high points of it, or
I can make
summarize it
comments
here.
in addition to...
Sure, please.
I will include it in the minutes, the whole letter will go in the minutes.
Okay, wonderful. I'm Pete Perugini. I live at 200 Richfield Street. I, along with my wife and my 2 children, moved to Guilford because we enjoy Guilford. I work in Guilford. It's a great place. My carriage house is the closest residential structure to the open pavilion. I'd like to start by saying that I support the Guilford Fair, and I understand how important the agricultural heritage is to the town, and what the fair actually does for the character of the town. And a lot of the events that are held there, we do also find enjoyable and go to. We commend the volunteers for keeping the grounds throughout the year, and in our opinion, the buildings are attractive. I think they're nice. I think they add. The storage one is a nice feature, and you can be able to put equipment away. And I think the open wall pavilion is attractive and fits in with the character of the property. But we have concerns over the future use of the property and what we feel is expanded non-compliant use of the property. We understand, Mr. Lee, we understand that the Agricultural Society needs to, continue, and this, for the site to stay out of the developer's hand, it's very important for it to be a viable entity. That said, those needs need to be balanced with the community around it and how it affects the community. Special permits are supposed to protect structures and properties like these in residential areas. And if you're complying with the special permit, that's the protection that we have that the town should enforce over it. I guess I reviewed the webpage before I came, and there's more than 5 or 6 events. There's about 12 listed. Those do not include the races. And also there's advertising on the webpage, which looks to me like a commercial advertising for weddings, corporate events like Land Rover programs that really, in my opinion, are not for profit. Some of the noise is very pleasurable that comes off of the fairgrounds, and some of the noise is not very pleasurable. We've been very tolerant with the fairgrounds, but I have to admit that if it gets an expanded use or continues some of the use that goes on there, it's frustrating, it's irritating. You go out in your back deck and you hear jousting, which is fun for maybe an hour, but when it goes on for 5 or 6 weekends or 4 weekends or 3, whatever it is for this current year, it's not enjoyable. And lastly, I'm concerned over the precedents this may set. You have 2 properties, or two buildings that have been built in a residential district without the proper process being followed. And the town of Guilford has a very standardized process that all properties should go through. It's a protection that the town provides for all people and for all their property rights. And I don't think the application, at least as I reviewed it a week ago, contained all of the items that if I were in a position of sitting on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'd be able to make a determination of to the uses of the property and how that's going to affect the neighboring properties, traffic patterns, and things of such. Lastly, I'd like to say this application and this property hopefully will stay private for a long period of time and in the hands of the Ag Society. And we want it to stay private. It's attractive. It's a beautiful part of Guilford. It's what attracted me to move down there in the first place. But this application and the use of the property and the decisions made tonight are going to extend a long time beyond this meeting and the fair that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. And my opposition is that I hope that a thorough process is done so that we can get to a point where it makes sense for all parties involved.
Well, let me ask you, if you could, what would you like to see as the results of this? Would you, I mean, if this is not approved, I guess that means they have to take the buildings down. But if it's approved with conditions, what conditions would you want to see in place to allow those buildings to stay?
Personally, being the closest residential structure, I'd like some limits around usage.
Okay.
Again, I'm an accountant by trade. I'm cognizant of having to make money and run a business and keep the property private.
But more specifically, what kind of limitations? Is it like number per year, the length of time, the type that you're unhappy with, or concerned about now?
From our standpoint, events, my wife and I,
Yes.
events that don't have ample, we don't care about the fair. We love the fair. We love the fireworks. My wife ran in the road race, although I'm sure people weren't happy about people using loudspeakers at 7 o'clock in the morning and the DJ playing at 8 o'clock in the morning. I thought those, I'm sure, were pretty loud. But people are pretty respectful and aren't going to file a complaint over a lot of items like that. If it gets to be more occurrences, I'm probably going to, I guess some limits on usage might be nice. Some limits on the sound that's able to go out from the property or emanate from the property might be nice to have. And I think would be important to having what appears to be operated as a commercial type of property within a residential district.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to? Yes, sir.
Roger Lane from Wales. My wife and I and our son love living in Guildford and in the historic district, and we love the fair and we love the fireworks, and we appreciate the works, the great work and contribution of many people in this community, often working in a volunteer capacity to organise events to maintain the vibrancy of the community. And that includes many of the wonderful events that occur at the fairground, and we've heard from some of those great individuals this evening. But we do believe that it's necessary to live harmoniously in a community. We should be good neighbours to one another, and we should respect the procedures and the ordinances that we've set up to govern how we do things. Sound to one individual may be disruptive to another, and we have certainly experienced disruption in our yard. For example, when our PA system is going all day, introducing the next model of car, we just found we can't use our yard on several weekends this summer. And we are sort of concerned that the construction of these buildings it does represent a substantial revision to the special permit, and maybe a harbinger of things to come, and a turning point in the intensity of use of the site. And we're concerned that this may bring some increased disruption to the residential and historic neighbourhood, and will negatively impact our quality of life and some of our neighbours. So we're concerned that the substantial revision of this special permit, necessitated by the significant changes in the site, that this special permit revision contain adequate safeguards. I have to say that the disregard for planning regulations in the construction of these barns, which we agree are aesthetically very nice, made an excellent choice there. And I'm not advocating ripping them down, but I think when we revise the special permit, that special permit does contain adequate safeguards. Because currently there is some use of the site that doesn't seem to be within the current special permit. It seems to have gone outside that. And so we do need some explicit safeguards. I think we need a full discussion, and I'm not sure we can have it tonight, about what events, what frequency, how many with amplification systems, how many with alcohol, how many individuals camping on the site overnight or for weeks on end, and so on. And these discussions should involve the widest spectrum of fully informed Guildford stakeholders and how to best balance the competing needs in the community. And we should generate some meaningful safeguards on how to use the fairground. And we may not be able to accommodate everyone's needs and preferences, but everyone their opinions should be solicited, they should be heard, and their opinions should be considered before important decisions are made. And we shouldn't just rush through a very incomplete revision of the special permit application with inadequate safeguards for the community. Because I think this may create adversarial positions in the community that will remain with us for years to come. For that reason, I'm advocating that the application is denied. And you know, because if it's not denied, I think there have been so many mistakes, or it's so incomplete, that you're leaving yourself wide open to legal action, and I would hate to see that. Because I think it will be embarrassing to Guildford and cause a lot of bad feeling. So I think we need to go for a win-win solution. Guildford needs the current and incomplete application for revision of a special permit to be denied, and we need to put together an application which includes adequate safeguards after more inclusive discussions and listening to the perspectives of all stakeholders. And we don't want anything that's currently planned not to proceed. These events, what's happening now shouldn't be used as an excuse to hurry this application through. And if there are any issues caused by the inappropriate way that these buildings were constructed, we should cooperate on sort of interim solutions for that.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak against? Yes, ma'am, please.
My name is Kathy Mack, and I live at 212 Whitfield Street. I have been an abutting neighbor to the fairgrounds for the last 15 years. I am a large supporter of the fair and attend every year. Some of my fondest memories of Guildford involve the fair. First, there was the joy of my daughter when she sat on her first camel, saw her first elephant, went to the petting zoo, entered her chicken, saw the baby goat being born. Then there was my own joy of seeing the flying Valendas year after year, watching the ox pull and cheering as the Guildford parade passes our house. I remember vividly going out on a Sunday morning for the first year we lived in Guildford to get the newspaper and seeing an elephant in front of the house. Every year since then, watching the young boys with their dads at their sides driving the tractors around the green has been a high point. This is the best of Guildford, and I am amazed and appreciative of all the hard work of the Hammerlands and the others in the Ag Society, what they do to keep these traditions alive and the fairgrounds a beautiful facility. My concern is that over the past few years, I've been increasingly bothered, and my family as well, by the noise of some of the rentals at the fairgrounds. I want to make absolutely clear that I'm not referring to the actual fair or the fireworks. I mean the other uses ranging from the Renaissance Fair to the Jazz Festival to the Cancer Walks to to other things that don't bother me, like the Lobster Fest. I understand that the Ag Society needs to rent out the fairgrounds to raise revenue to continue running the fair. But I feel it is important to devise a system to ensure that the rentals provide the least disruption possible to the residential neighborhood surrounding the fairgrounds in terms both of traffic volume and noise. I really can't speak about traffic volume because I'm on the noise side, and we aren't really disrupted by the traffic, but I could imagine it could be a concern. Many of the current uses meet this standard, but unfortunately, an increasing number use amplification of sound and therefore can be extremely disruptive to how we enjoy our property on weekends. In addition, it's unclear to me whether members of the Ag Society are even aware of which events are disruptive to the neighbors and which are not. I'm very happy to be able to have this opportunity to have this important discussion with the Ag Society and with members of the P&Z on what special permit uses are appropriate to the fairground and what conditions would be satisfactory to both the fairground and the neighbors. I was gone for 6 weeks this summer. A few days after I returned, I received a certified letter from the Ag Society stating that they were applying for a special permit for the construction of 2 barns. I went to the P&Z to look at the file to see how these new barns would be used, where they would be located, and what setbacks from the property lines and wetlands they were proposing. When I got to the office, Annette informed me that the barns were already up. And now the Ag Society was seeking a special permit in the site plan and the building permit. I went to look at them and thought they looked wonderful. And as I was standing there, Barbara drove up to deliver a sandwich to her husband, who was working. I told her the barns looked great and that my only concern was their use. She said the open barn, which is very close to the rear of the property and is the one that concerns many of us, would be used for events such as weddings when people wanted protection against the rain but did not want to rent a tent. I told her that this caused me concern because when renters of the property used amplified sound systems, many of us on Whitfield Street could hear every word. And I think weddings would not be allowed, but anyway, something like that, just for weddings, would be a concern of many of us simply because of the noise factor. When I went back to the zoning office to look at the application file to see what proposed uses would be, I was surprised to see the statement of proposed use on the application was left blank. There was no A2 survey, no indication of setbacks of the structures from the property line, no wetland boundaries on any map. I went back and looked at the notice letter I received from the Ag Society to see whether it explained the uses of the barns in any greater detail. It said only that the enclosed barn, as Barbara already said, would be available for use during the season from time to time. Then I looked at the special permit and I was compute requirements for the standards, and a key consideration, I have no problem with the structures, but the key consideration is also the use of the structures. And if there's a substantial change to the site plan, then it becomes a revision, as I understand it, George, a revision of the special permit, that the 1989 special permit, so that we can then discuss that permit as well and the conditions and the new conditions that we think appropriate for the use. Is that how it works?
I think so.
So anyway, I wasn't sure whether that's how it worked, but I thought that's how it would work. I think a lot of the neighbors, a lot of people I spoke with, thought this was only a hearing about the structures and didn't realize that it was also a hearing about the use. And that was very upsetting because one neighbor said to me, well, I'm concerned about the noise, but I love the barns. And so anyway, I think there is that confusion out there, and I think that's very unfortunate.
Well, let me just go back. The special permit from 1989, to the extent somebody was aggrieved or unhappy with that, that could have been appealed. The time has long since run on that one, so that one is as it is.
Right.
With regard to this is a special permit for the buildings. However, we can attach conditions to the special permit, which could limit the uses of
Now,
what
is
the
it the
permit
special
is.
permit just for these 2 buildings, or the way I understood it from Lansky was that because those 2 buildings are located, and this was very confusing. I tried to see whether George couldn't really advise me on this, and that's why we started talking to Marge. She said that since these two buildings are located on the fairgrounds, and anyone who uses those two buildings will probably be also using the fairgrounds and parking there and walking through there, and perhaps using the laboratory that's there, it becomes it's then necessary to have the conditions applied to the entire fairground, and it would be a revision to the 1989 special permit.
Well, what we could do is, if this special permit is granted, it could be granted with conditions, and those conditions would apply to the whole fairground. That's true. Okay.
That's my
Right.
guess.
And okay, so what I'm hearing so far, I think, and please, anyone who's spoken against this, correct me, but and not necessarily against the buildings, it's you're worried about an increased utilization or newer, more intense use of the facilities.
And not even that. I mean, that is one thing, yes,
Okay.
more intense use. But even the current use, we would like the fairgrounds to take into consideration that there are neighbors, and some of the uses that they currently have are very, very disruptive. And I have lived there 15 years, and I never called because I'm such a fan of the fairground. But when I saw this, I thought, boy, this is an opportunity to discuss this because, you know, I am interested in how they make the decisions of which events. And some events, particularly those that use microphones, and either have pipe music being through a microphone, which is the worst. I mean, the live music, I happen to love live music, so I'm in favor of it. And any type of live music, from rock and roll to country, does not bother me, but it does bother others, and you can hear that music very clearly and very loudly. So there should either be a specific, there should be some type of number on the music requirements, that with loud music that neighbors can hear, or the neighbors should be able to hear the music. So anyway, as a neighbor, I found the loudspeakers the most disruptive. There was at one point this, I think it was the cancer walk, and that went from like 8 in the morning through the next morning. And every 5 minutes, the guy was blaring in the microphone to encourage the walkers. And then the kids slept overnight. So that kind of use is very, very disruptive to the neighborhood. But other uses, such as the Lobster Fest or the Taste of Guilford, I must say even the jazz show, or whatever it was called, was not bad and was not too loud because they were contained in the tents, and there were 4 concerts going on simultaneously, and I guess the amplification wasn't that loud. So, you know, you never know until the actual day what it's going to be. And it's very hard to even plan a party of your own, because if you have a party of your own when they're amplifying, there's no way you can compete. So, so that's our concern. And we do want the special permits enforced, and I mean, if that requires us calling, we can do that. George mentioned that we also had the noise ordinance, but the last thing I want to do is be frustrated about hearing noise and then having to call the Guilford Police and then spending 2 hours with them measuring the decibels. This is a special permit use, and we would like them to fit the requirements and try to be cognizant of the neighbors. And the special permit requirements are that the neighbors are able to continue to use their property and aren't impaired, and that the town plan be followed. And the town plan is that, as you all know, but is that you know, you have a residential downtown, and you want people to live down here, and then special review goes to the town center historic district, and you want people to continue to maintain these beautiful old homes. And many of our neighbors who are speaking here have put lots and lots of money in their beautiful homes. And Guilford Historic District has never looked as beautiful as it looks now. And there was a time when all these homes were going down, 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 and now they're all coming and flourishing. But these neighbors want to enjoy their yard, want to enjoy the historic district. And I don't know whether for for the record, I have to, Mark, I think, pointed to some of them, but I would have to put on my glasses. But the town zoning regulations 2739 of the Guilford Town Center District says uses permitted only by site plan or special permit should not depress the maintenance or rehabilitation of the historic homes in the downtown center. And I think loud music would tend to do that, and there are not limits on it. And the second one says the establishment of a special use shall not have a significant adverse effect on the historic district, such as the introduction of audible elements that are out of character with the property or altering its setting. And depending on the music that's being played, you could argue very strongly that that is happening. Finally, special permits standard states that the potential use should not hinder or impair the use of the adjacent lots, and we support that. And then in conclusion, I just want to say that the historic district has never been in finer shape. We, the neighbors, are on Whitfield Street are the stewards of history, which we are proud to pass on to our children. We have done our part of the job. The Ag Society likewise is planning its future, where barns would increasingly replace tents, and I see no problem with that. I think they are doing their job. But now, as a community, we need your assistance, the P&Z Commission's assistance, so that we can establish appropriate conditions on the use of the fairgrounds to carry us forward into the future. And I look forward to this discussion.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak against? Okay. Anyone else wishing to ask a question or to offer any more input? Well, yes, we'll get back to it. Let me ask you first, and then we'll come back to the applicant.
I have one question as we're talking about
Yes.
events going on there. If we have a concern about traffic, such as with the fairground, with the fireworks, we've already been to the chief of police and asked them to close the road off on Lover's Lane just while the fireworks are actually going off. Where else do we go? Because we didn't get anywhere with that request.
I don't know. We don't have jurisdiction over the roads. George, do you know who? I mean, I guess it is the chief. If he makes the determination that...
Or the Board of Selectmen. If you have a concern, I would go to the Board of Selectmen.
Yes.
I do have two other letters for the project. I guess my biggest thing is that I was under the presumption that tonight we were here to approve, disapprove the two parts. I do understand the concerns that the neighbors do have. I do have traffic study here from the police department during all the events that have been held there. I can give this to
Yes,
you.
I would suggest you put that into the record.
Any incidents or anything that has happened there at the ground. On Whitfield Street, on Lover's Lane, Stonehouse, Boston Street, whatever, that covers. And here's the list of events that have taken place at the grounds. I guess part of me, and I had lived downtown for a while myself, right on Boston Street. I grew up here, my husband grew up here. Many people that are in the Ag Society have grown up here, so we know what this town was like, and it has changed. It's changed tremendously from when we all grew up here. And with change, there's adversity, without a doubt. Okay. Noise it's a funny thing. And I will say that for sure.
Okay.
Depending on the way the wind's blowing, depending on how the weather is. Now, you have concerts on the green every Sunday. There are residents who do live around the green. Those bands, they amplify. When we're working down the fairgrounds, we can hear them down there. But it's for the community. okay? I guess that's the way we kind of look at things, is we're supporting the community. These events are for the community. There is a noise ordinance in place that is to be followed. And I spoke to Gil about this, that the noise ordinance has to be included with any rental application that goes out, so that everybody is aware of it. And I just really, I don't want us to get limited so much to the amount of events that we can have there if it's going to start putting us in a negative factor. I think we have to go back to our directors and have a discussion. I know, obviously, if we did want to have weddings or class reunions down there, which, when I say class reunions, those fairgrounds mean a lot to a lot of people who grew up here, okay, and the same for weddings. That we would have to get a revision of the special permit that we have, okay? And I don't think that's, you know, I mean, if we'd be willing to stick to what we have right now, and then maybe at a later date, tackle the revision to that.
George, we have, from when we opened the application, we have, what, 65 days to make it, but we have how long to close the public hearing, and then how long to vote after that? Do you happen to recall what the...
65 days from opening, plus the applicant can grant an additional 65 days to continue the hearing. After the close of the public hearing, you have 65 days to act.
Okay.
And I think we can get another 65 days on that with the
Well,
consent.
let me just ask the applicant and some of the people neighbors who have an issue here, do you think it would pay for perhaps, and I know this is the worst possible time because you have the fair, but in the near term, to have a meeting between you and a group of people from the community who could try to work this out, and then come back to us with conditions you can all live with? And then if you can't do that, then we'll make the decision, and somebody will probably be unhappy. So, but I got to ask you, is that something you feel comfortable doing? You're the app. I can't force you to do it. I'm just asking if that's...
And unfortunately, I can't answer for
Okay.
the entire group. I mean, I'm not saying that they would be opposed, but I think that it's... Can I bring out my main concern at this
Yes,
point?
absolutely.
Okay. The fair is a couple weeks away.
Right.
All right. And we need to utilize these two buildings as part of our exhibits.
Well, they're already
Exhibit
there,
buildings.
so...
Well, I'm just
you're
saying,
gonna-
I'm just asking that at least we would be
They're not
able...
going to see a vote. Right, so they don't have building permits.
You don't need to see a vote, you don't have a building permit.
Correct. And we can't, Reggie can't sign the building permit until the special permit has been approved and filed.
Yeah, we're in a catch-22. All
At
right.
least as far as I know.
How quickly can Reggie sign the building permit?
Well, once the special permit's approved and put on file, she can sign it immediately.
And then how long?
No,
does it-
not until it's effective.
Yeah, the effective date and the filing. And then she can sign it.
Well, let
And
me...
that's a week.
Well, you have to approve that application.
If it were approved.
It could go on file there. As soon as we can publish it in the paper, which we could probably do in about 3 or 4 days from now, maybe.
It will go out next Thursday in the paper. And then it's 15, it's
There's an appeal period as
effective,
well.
and then a 15-day appeal period after that comes out.
Can there not be some sort of interim extension of the current permit with a provision that after the fair's over, we have to agree to a revision?
yeah.
There is
Well-
no current permit.
Well, let me ask this. Even if we approved it tonight, is there enough time for you to issue a CO prior to the fair?
When's the fair?
2021, 22?
All right, let me ask you this then. If we approved it with the condition that you agreed to meet with this group point within the near future, and then submit a new request for special permit dealing with the uses that you can agree to? Is that, and if you can't agree to it, then bring it before us and we'll make a decision. Is that something that would work for you?
Do you mind if,
Talk amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves? Yes, why don't you? Okay.
While we're talking amongst ourselves, special permit.
Is the public hearing still up?
I'm sorry?
What's the status of the public hearing right now?
It's still going.
Still open.
It's still open. So this is on the
Commission
record.
is talking amongst itself. This matter of the special permit as it relates to these specific buildings presumably can be handled tonight.
Yes.
We also have had testimony from the applicant that said, by the way, we're in violation of our special permit because of the Renaissance Fair. Their website is talking, I mean, they're advertising weddings, whether they're having them is another issue, but the Renaissance Fair sounds like it's a violation. Sometime between now and the next time the Renaissance Fair rolls around, they're going to have to either go through some magic hoops with the Renaissance Fair to turn it into a nonprofit, or they're going to have to come to us.
Yeah.
And in that case, then that might be the avenue or opportunity for reopening the special permit on the broader sense of hours, amplification, number of activities, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
If
it
in
could,
fact,
but-
if we were to vote tonight,
Right.
that would
But
get
if-
them their C of O.
If it got canceled, there's no more Renaissance, then the issue would never come up. I'd like to get them
Okay.
together to settle, so.
unfortunately, we don't have a quorum here
Okay.
for our directors, but is there a possibility of a temporary CO to get us through the fair, and then we can try and we'll have our meeting with our directors?
I don't think so, but you'd be an
I
expert.
can't sign the building permit until you render a decision.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess the answer is no, then. We have to, we can attach a condition to it.
I mean,
Dave-
we would have a meeting with our directors, but unfortunately, I can't
Right.
do that right here and now.
But David's point is well taken. This, if I understand it, this application is only for the buildings, period. That's all it's for.
Well, it's for the two buildings, but the question is, what are those two
But-
buildings being used
so
for?
if
It's
they-
part of the Uber.
Yes,
special
but,
permit
so
question.
your point though is that if they know now what the special permit says and what they're limited to, and if they have someone that wants to use the fairgrounds that doesn't fit into this, what's in the special permit, they've got to come back to us.
That's correct.
Right.
They haven't bothered to do that yet, but they ought to. Because
Yeah, but,
I mean, we could
this is pretty bad. It's a description of activities. And we also don't have a procedure for determining whether or not an activity conforms to it or not until after the activity is underway.
The Renaissance Fair does contain agriculture.
And is it an activity of a nonprofit nature? I have no
The
idea.
nonprofit nature, most organizations that are nonprofit have to file a 501c3. That's just a simple paper that is on file that we can check.
the Renaissance Fair isn't.
Whether that is such a thing or not.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, because doesn't this construction, I mean, it represents a fairly substantial material change to the site. And the special permit, the previous special permit was issued on the basis of a particular site with a particular set of...
That's right, but this is a new special permit.
So this is such a big change.
Well, I mean, that's a matter of opinion, that's your opinion, okay? Not everybody may agree with that. But before we go there, my question is there a way to try to get you your CO, but also to address the concerns that these people have, and see if there's a way to negotiate something reasonable? That's what I'm trying to do here.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, I would like to, we have 28 directors, so
Okay.
that's why I'm saying that we don't have a quorum here with us
I
tonight.
mean, one thing you could do, I'm just thinking out loud, which is not really always the best way, but you could approve the special permit for these two buildings with the condition that they can only be used for the fair. And then, if the applicant wants to use them for something else, which presumably they do, so down the road a ways,
They'll need to
they would
come
come back with a new application, which would then elaborate in detail the way many people have asked or talked about tonight, how the whole property would be used, and try to define it a little bit better than we have right now.
That is a
That's a good.
way around the problem.
So we might have to include the other events as well. So, I mean, we might find it appropriate to include.
Well, we would limit
Mount
it,
Renaissance
right,
Fair
we would
event.
limit it to just,
The fair this year.
Yeah.
And then if they want to do it, use it for something else, they have to come back to the commission. Because
Okay.
we can't revise the special permit
No.
unless they make an
make an
application.
application.
George, what about the events that are already scheduled through October?
Well, they can't, well, under that scenario, they can't use those buildings. They could still use the fairgrounds. As long as they didn't use those buildings. I don't know how enforceable that all is.
Where was Oktoberfest going to
It's on the ground.
be? No, but in the pavilion or in the barn?
Well, not in the barn. The barn,
Okay. In the
that's,
pavilion,
well,
maybe?
maybe. I
Oktoberfest.
mean,
All right, let me ask you this. If we were to approve it and allow them to be used for the rest of this season, because the season ends when, October, the end of October?
yeah, whatever the last thing is there. I mean,
Okay.
that will give us time to get our, I mean,
And
right
then you
after the
can't
fair,
use
we
those
can have our,
anymore until you come back with the request for the special permit to revise.
right, and that would give us time to get our directors to meet
Right, and then
together.
basically you'll have until the spring to,
Well, I don't think
or-
we want to wait that
no,
long.
but you could, technically.
What is Oktoberfest? What is the event? What do you envision the Oktoberfest event being?
It's October 18th, 19th, and 20th.
Yeah, that's when.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I asked what, can you explain what is the Oktoberfest event?
What are they doing?
An Oktoberfest. I don't,
Dancing?
they had scheduled this or tried to schedule this.
Tuesday.
Oh, they is
St.
a
George
offshoot of the Knights of Columbus. There's 40 men that have decided that they wanted to go a little bit different direction and put on this event. It's totally nonprofit.
And that's the last one this year? or
That's the
this-
last one, except for a couple races if they show up, and that's the Adams Middle School or the high school.
Okay.
What kind of music did they say they're going
Oom Papa, I don't know.
All right,
Let me, just, for those of you who don't know, relative to the issue of music and the noise ordinance, the town noise ordinance allows concerts, music performances and concerts, or applicants who are going to conduct music or have concerts to apply for an exemption from the noise ordinance, which they have to go to the Board of Selectmen to do. The fairgrounds, or the Ag Society just did that just recently for the fair itself. That then exempts the musical events from the application of the noise ordinance, because clearly the music, emanates off the grounds and it exceeds the decibel level. So for the Oktoberfest, if they have music and they want it to be exempt from the noise ordinance, they would have to go to the Board of Selectmen.
okay.
The theory being then the Board of Selectmen can put conditions on their approval, like, it's got to be over by 8 o'clock or whatever condition.
All right, well, I think, I'm convinced there's at least some safeguards through the end of October here. All right, let me ask this then. Anybody else wishing to make any comments about this before we close the public hearing? Any questions? Yes?
No, I do just want to make a final point. I'm willing to have these in Albania, but I do have a German heritage, and I might actually dance. But anyway, but I did want to just point out to Barbara that the town of Guilford regulations governing the use of the town green do say that a public address system will be allowed only to the extent specified in the permit. The town reserves the right to regulate the volume of such public address systems to confine the sound as nearly as possible to the area of the green and to avoid any nuisance to the homes, businesses, churches in the vicinity of the green. So they do take it into
All right.
consideration.
Well, that's,
And I hope you do talk to the people and try to situate it so that it doesn't hit one group of areas, one group of neighbors.
okay. All right, hearing any other comments from anybody? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing on this matter. And we will move on to the Sullivan Farm LLC. This is a zoning map revision to change the approximately 35-acre parcel from an R7 to a TS2 zone. Sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jim Sullivan. I'm representing Sullivan Farm North, which is the park. There's actually two parcels here, Sullivan Farm North and Sullivan and my mother's.
Jim, speak as loudly as you can, please.
I'm representing Sullivan Farm North, which is one of the parcels we're asking for the zone change to, as well as my mother's residence, which is incorporated into the parcel as well. The parcel includes about 35 acres. I've mapped it out. The blue line is the property boundary, which incorporates 70 acres in Guilford and about 120 acres in North Branford. The pink outlines the 80 in Guilford. The yellow outlines the parcel that we're asking for the zoning change in Guilford for. It's currently zoned R7. We're asking for it to be changed to TS2. The northern boundary of the property is the Algonquin natural gas line, which runs through the property, bisects the property right there on the yellow line. The reason we chose that is we felt that the property would be best served for commercial use in the front, which borders Route 1. The rear of the property is accessible if we wanted to do any residential development from Jamestown Road, which is a cul-de-sac circle there. We feel that there's a natural wetland here that kind of acts as a buffer between the area we're looking for the zoning change and the residential areas in the rear. This is the topo map of, we've got another map of it.
Well, we'll get to that when it's for questions. Please just let the applicant make his presentation.
Again, this is just the map that shows the gas line coming through from Route 22 and it ends at a pumping station on Route 1. One of the maps also I wanted to show you is the current assessor's map, which shows other properties in the neighborhood. We currently own this property on the south side of Route 1. It is zoned MUC1, which is commercial use. There's also property down the street, which I believe is zoned CD, which is commercial use as well. What was the catalyst for us asking for the zoning change was a conversation that I've had with Brian McClone from the Economic Development Commission, as well as George Kroll. We've had a number of businesses approach both the town and us directly, looking to buy pieces of the property to, in one case specifically, a retail operation for selling agricultural products. It's a nationwide retail outlet that would again, sell agricultural related products. The piece that we're asking for, actually the entire piece, is included in the town's economic development. It's the economic development action plan from 2004, in which that piece is listed as an economic development opportunity area, as well as obviously this one, and there's another piece down the street that Russ Waldo was listed as well. We think it's a reasonable request and good use of the property. Again, it's currently zoned R7 for residential use. I know that there's I think, based on the request that we have, a lack of space available for new businesses to move into town. Obviously, helping to grow the brand list would be a good thing from the tax base standpoint. Again, we've got some interest in pieces of the property. And TS2 was the zoning change, or the zone designation we thought would be the most acceptable for use. I believe that I've met with the Economic Development Commission. I believe that they're on board with this. I've met with George and some other town officials. I can't speak for them, but I think I have think they understand what we want to do.
Questions from the commission? Questions from the public?
I was just wondering, what type of response have you gotten from your neighbors? Pro?
I haven't gotten any response whatsoever. There's a neighbor here that is prepared to speak in favor, but I have not received any negative comments from them.
Okay.
I had one neighbor come in and reviewed the file and was supportive of it. That's the...
Okay, well, I think we did get some letters tonight.
We have one that is lost on the table somewhere. That
Okay.
came in. That was the only one for so long.
All right. Questions for the applicant, sir?
Mike Pappas, 200 Jamestown Drive. I live at the end of the cul-de-sac. So my question, first of all, what is TS2? I have no idea.
This is a good opportunity. George, would you mind telling us the relative density of R7 versus TS2 in terms of residential development?
Well, and plus, what are the uses that are permitted in a TS2 zone? So why don't we just explain what...
R7 is a residential zone that allows residential uses only, for the most part. Has a minimum lot size of 2 acres. The TS2 is a general purpose commercial zoning district that allows a wide variety of retail stores, offices, and also allows multifamily housing. It allows, I think you asked about residential density.
Number 4.
8 dwelling units per acre. I'm sorry, 6 dwelling units per acre, residential dwelling units. It's the same zoning that prevails on the property that's being developed further east. In fact, there's an apartment building under construction in the vicinity. TS2 zone is the same zone that covers the area where Anthony's is and the other commercial activity further east. It permits, let's see.
George, is it correct to say that currently this 35-acre lot accommodates either 17 or 18 homes as an R7, as it's zoned R7?
That's
If it
pretty
was
hard to
strictly
predict,
residential?
depending on the shape of the parcel, how much wetlands there is. There are a lot of other variables that would
So it
affect
could
the
be less.
residential density, yeah,
Or
probably.
it could be more, we don't know.
Could be more?
Well,
Could it
probably
be
not
more?
more, because it's 2 acre minimum lot size.
Let's be clear.
But it
So it
could,
can't be
unless it
more
was like
than-
an open space subdivision, perhaps, it would be slightly more.
More, yeah.
And if it were rezoned as TS2, it would accommodate about 210 homes?
Well, just based on multiplying the 16 units per acre times 35, yes, although,
But then there are wetlands
and
considerations.
there's also, there are no sewers there, of course, so it would have to be on-site sewage disposal, which would effectively limit it much more than that. But it would permit multifamily housing, medium density type of housing. How many units you could actually get there, I have no idea.
Okay, does that answer?
TS2 also allows gas stations, correct?
Although it does,
But-
but there's a restriction on gas stations, the number of stations that can be located west of exit 57. So effectively, there are no more gas stations permitted. So one of the gas stations would have to close in order to allow one to go out there.
And if that extra mart were to close, would it have to clean out its tank, or would it simply have to close in order for a new gas station to open?
Zoning, we don't really regulate the cleaning out of the tank. They'd have to cease to exist as a gas station.
It could not be a permitted use in that
Right.
property anymore before it could be
Motor
permitted
vehicle
somewhere
repair is
else.
also permitted,
So-
again, with that, a similar limitation.
The extra mart
Well,
is...
wait a minute, just a second. The question you asked was, what's a TS2 zone? So does that answer your question, sir? What's available? Are there any other questions that anybody has at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Atlas 200 Jamestown Drive, I'm also in the cul-de-sac. Have you ever driven on Jamestown Drive?
Yes,
You have?
yes.
Extremely windy. When Bob Pleasure drove on it to see about the bus going down there, he said a drunk might have set the road up. It's just not a road we want a lot of traffic on to access. And you own, what, 200 acres on that side?
The parcel we're talking about is not, we're not talking about Jamestown.
No, I know, but you're talking about if they access under residential at another point.
Well, excuse me, ma'am, do you have a question, though? Can you phrase this in the form of a question?
My question was that they were driven on Jamestown Drive.
Okay. The answer was
Yes.
yes. Next question, please. Sir.
Anthony Capiro, 462 Granite Road. I'm not clear what parcel we're talking about. Is it the orange parcel?
No.
No. It's
No,
the
this
green
is just
parcel.
highlighted that there is
Okay.
commercial development, or not commercial development.
And if I'm
commercial
looking at
zoning.
this correctly, north is up.
North is this way.
Okay, so the parcel in question is north of Route 1.
Maybe you should go back to your earlier drawing.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Maybe you should go back to the top row, one that showed the parcel.
George, it is true that TS2 also allows motor vehicle repair, correct, in
This is
unlimited?
Route 1. No, it has the same limitation.
It does.
There's a limited number of them permitted, and all those,
They've been maxed
they've all
out.
been maxed out.
Okay. Are you okay, sir, with that answer?
I am. To further the question, what is the access to this lot currently?
Route 1.
And, okay, it's from Route
This
1.
is Route 1 from here.
And is there any proposed access with your site plan or your development plan?
There is no development plan. This is a zoning change request
Okay.
application.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
The zoning change, I mean, could it be limited to from the gas line to Route 1 and not?
That's what he's asking for.
So let's clarify again. You're talking about that entire parcel is partly in Guilford, partly in North Branford.
I'm asking,
No, the entire parcel.
we own the entire parcel.
Correct.
only
The
in-
entire parcel is partly in Guilford, partly in Branford.
Correct.
Or North Branford. The portion that is in pink to the east is the Guilford portion.
Correct.
And you're referring only to the yellow outline, which has frontage on the Post Road,
Correct.
being changed from R7 to TS2.
Correct.
All the rest will remain R7.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the pink area is not being changed.
No.
And just help me out again, where did you say Jamestown Drive was?
Jamestown Drive is right there.
But Jamestown Drive is relevant here because if you turn the frontage parcel into TS2, your access to the rear would presumably have to come through Jamestown or some other way. You could no longer come through the Post Road.
There's a big gas line there.
Presumably. Oh, and there's a gas line. You can't cross the easement.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you couldn't cross it anyways, right? So,
Yeah.
Any other, yes, ma'am?
The property you own, south of Route 1, that's on the market.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to build on the south of Route 1, they need to be on north of Route 1.
That's correct. And it's not zoned for retail.
It's 100 acres,
They don't need 100 acres.
so just,
I think you didn't hear the second part of his answer, that
It's not
MUC, one doesn't permit
Yes.
retail stores as a use. It only allows
below,
the south side parcel. It only allows offices and research parks and development uses of that kind. It does not permit retail stores.
what about the retail property on top of that? I mean, I don't see the need, retail property on the rock pile. I mean,
Well, I mean, again, this is a time for questions. You can make statements for or against later. Sir, you had a question?
I was going to ask something similar, I think. There was reference made by Mr. Sullivan to a town study that indicated that more business property was needed on this end of Route 1. Is that
No, I didn't say that there was a study. I just said there was a conversation with town officials and Economic Development Commission that there was a request from businesses outside of town that were looking to move to town because there was a lack of correctly or applicable zoning properties. That was the catalyst for the application.
But Jim, can I just add to you?
Sure, go ahead.
You made the comment in reference to the economic plan going back to 2004, when this property, along with a few others, was identified as potential development areas, assuming the private owners were interested in doing that.
Correct.
We haven't had any interest in the other private developers on a couple of the other properties, but you've come forward, we've collectively been talking about this piece. times have changed. It's been residential for a number of years with no activity and no strong outlook for developing to what is currently zoned. And I'm telling you more than asking a question, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions that anyone has at this time? Sir?
I guess my question would be why this property rather than other property that's available as you travel east on Route 1?
Well, this is because he's asking for it. I mean, he's
Because other businesses are interested in it as opposed to...
Well, apparently he's got somebody interested in this one, so it's his right to ask for a zoning change. We don't have to grant it, but it is his right to request one.
I'm just trying to, I guess, find out more about what the need is as opposed to what desires might be.
Right. No, my only point is that he has a right to request his property to be rezoned, and that's why we're here. Mr. Cronin.
For the record, Attorney Tom Cronin, 71 Bradley Road, Madison, on behalf of the applicant. I took the opportunity today to come over and look at the plan of conservation and development, and I reduced that to the only piece of material I had to write on, but I was able to capture in very small print some of the salient points. Not for the benefit of the commission, but perhaps for the benefit of the audience, I would posit my understanding of zoning hierarchy. And that is that this commission has very broad latitude and broad discretion in terms of writing regulations and amending regulations and creating regulations and so on. But they do that under the umbrella of the Plan of Conservation and Development. By way of analogy, the PCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development, is kind of the Constitution, and then you're writing the laws that are consistent with that. So the most recent version of the PCD is the 2002 edition. I understand that it is under revision. It's probably pretty close to being published, but as far as I know, it's not officially adopted yet.
That's correct.
So everything except for the fact about it being ready for publication.
Very close, but no cigar. So
Yes, only in the opposite direction. Don't even think about the cigar for a long time.
Okay, so 2002 is the operative plan.
2 or 4?
2002 is the PCD, 2004 is the Economic Development Plan, which makes some sense because they do the Economic Development Plan after the PCD. So on page 21, it says that, so this kind of sets the overall planning goals for the town. On page 21, it says the area contiguous to US 1 in the west end of town is the only remaining opportunity for further appropriate commercial development. That's an actual quote on page 21. Overall policies are to discourage strip malls and to encourage mixed use. On page 32, they talk about compatible commercial development, and they're talking about uses that are compatible with the neighborhood, with the town, with the town's history. It's kind of ironic tonight that we're following the Ag Society. I mean, Guilford's seal, as far as I know, touts the fact that it's been an agricultural community since it was founded. And although we're talking about a zone change that's more global, the specific use that we're hoping to attract is certainly compatible with agricultural uses. On page 30, I'm sorry, this page 32. On page 34, it talks about development that's sensitive to the local environment. TS and compatible. I'm sorry, yeah, the retail is compatible. The retail that we have in mind is compatible with Guilford's farming history. They also note that this area of town is comparatively poorer in terms of soils. So, although I think it might be helpful to our case to say that we get a lot of residential development in there, if the soils are not that good, you're going to have trouble getting septic systems in there. Another kind of global observation in the PCD points out how dependent Guilford is, like Madison, on a residential tax base. And it's kind of pointing in the direction when you have an opportunity to do responsible commercial development, that's a benefit to the town. The last is, if I can read this note, monitor, and this is page 62, monitor and upgrade distribution of and allowed uses along the I-95 Boston Post Road corridor. So all I want to put in front of you are those references to the PCD that seem to be supportive of what we're doing. I understand the question about, well, what's the specific need? I think that the answer to that question, or the right to answer that question, is with the applicant who has the right to come in front of you and you can decide. But all I'm suggesting to you is if you do decide to grant this, you don't have to have any concerns about bumping into the plan of conservation and development and being obstructed by them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the,
I
sir?
should have identified myself before. Frank Farrell from 159 Granite Road. Can Mr. Sullivan or Mr. Cronin be more specific as to the agricultural businesses or whatever that were being referred to earlier?
They have asked that their name not be used, but I'm just mentioning that I can describe them as a chain that caters to the agricultural and farming community. And what they would be looking for fits within the guidelines of.
Can I ask, is that the only business, or 35 acres for one business?
That's currently, yes, that's one business.
Hey, Jim, to clarify the point, I think what he's asking, this first site might be about 4 acres of the 35. I thought he was asking, was that one going to take all 35?
Right, that is.
No, it's
So,
roughly.
so other businesses, maybe non-agricultural businesses, could go into the other remaining areas.
Any, obviously, things that are covered under the TS2 zones.
That's right.
Which, I guess my point also would be, those things would have to be under site review or future review. It wouldn't be, automatic uses. I'm not.
Well, what would happen?
Site plan review.
There'd be site plan
Almost all
reviews.
site plan.
Right. Maybe you would need a special permit or variance, depending on what you're proposing. We don't know. But those would have to be addressed later, when there's more specifics and there's a plan in place. Yes, sir.
So in order to be able to utilize this 35 acres that you're talking about, obviously you're going to have to put the road in or lower. Because assuming that the business you're talking about is going to be on Route 1, I'm going to suggest that in order to access the parking, they put some kind of a road into there. And I'm hoping, as my wife stressed before, that coming in through Jamestown Drive, which is a very winding road and is not conducive to any kind of traffic other than the few residents that are on that road today. I have a real concern, over that part of it also.
Just questions, though, at this point. So the answer was?
The answer is that we're not talking about any property contiguous to Jamestown Road.
Right.
No, but in order to access those 35 acres, obviously you're going to have to have some kind of a road going.
The road would come off of Route 1, Boston Post Road.
Can we go back to the map that shows the neighboring subdivision? I just want to understand, who are the adjacent, what are the adjacent parcels to this? Because as pointed out, and I was going to ask a clarifying question of Attorney Cronin, but you're not seeking some type of modified TS2, you're seeking a full TS2 zoning for this parcel with the frontage, which does have 26 possible uses, including entertainment facilities, schools, funeral homes, motor vehicle repair, museums, restaurants. So this parcel has a bunch of residential immediately to the east.
This is owned by, I believe, Mrs. Sosesky.
Okay. That's undeveloped
This is
property
her
right
parcel
now?
here.
Okay.
I believe there's another residential home that was built here first.
There's 2, there's 3 altogether, Sosesky Farm.
Sorry?
3 Sosesky Farm.
Right, there's one on Route 1 and 2 in the back. So that belongs to the Soseskis.
Okay.
So that's the neighbor to the east.
And that's
or in this property.
R7 presumably also?
Yes.
Okay.
Neighbors to the west would be the Marys, who's here tonight. And then the next piece over is I believe owned by Janet Reisman, and this is Route 22. We're not sure where we're going. Right at that point. And just point out also that a lot of the uses that were mentioned are also allowed under MUC1. Buildings, office buildings, financial financial institutions, age-restricted housing, the density of 6 units per acre. So a lot of the same uses are actually, except for retail. Probably the biggest retail and, yeah, retail is probably the biggest one.
Other questions at this time?
Just
Sir?
a point of clarity, the home that's currently on this site is yellow, single-story yellow house?
White. The white.
No, wait.
It's a white house.
Yeah, it's a White House with,
That's your mom's house?
correct. There's some, there's some barns and outbuildings, but this is her home right here.
Okay.
And this is the 2-acre piece that is part of her residence.
Okay. And is access more or less across Route 1 from where the, I guess it's your site, is now selling topsoil, that access road?
The topsoil is on the opposite side, and the access road for that is over.
Somewhere in that neighborhood?
Goes that way.
Okay.
Is this the same parcel that the town got involved in considering spending like $40,000 to look into developing quite a few years ago? I can answer the question.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, the question, ma'am? Yes.
Marietta Daddio. I have a question. You said this was for a 4-acre piece?
There's,
Where is the 4 acres that this?
we have a
particular-
party that's interested in 4 acres.
What 4 acres?
Right here.
You're looking right on.
That's what we had discussed on this. It's not, there's nothing finalized, there's no contract signed. But this is on Route 1. They would want frontage on Route 1, they may.
Okay, so you're looking for 35 acres with the party interested in 4 acres only?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
Is the gas line that is on your property, it's the one that comes through Jefferson, where Jamestown is off of Jefferson?
There's 2 utility easements. There's one for Connecticut Light and Power.
Those are those big power lines?
Correct. And then there's one that runs between Jamestown Circle, which is here, and Route 1, which, and the Sisesky property, that traverses this way.
Is that at the front of your property?
Pardon?
Is it at the front of your property? Because it's not too far in on Jefferson.
Here is the Connecticut power line. Across this.
That's the power line, that's
Yeah.
not the gas.
The gas line, Jefferson cul-de-sac is right there. Or, I'm sorry, yes, I believe it crosses Jefferson at some point, because it does terminate on Route 1 down by the restaurant.
All right, other questions? Okay, I'm going to ask, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application? Please, why don't we start back there?
Steve Cox, 162 Sconset Lane. I'm chairman of the Economic Development Commission. And I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Economic Development Commission. We think that changing from an R7 to a TSD2, approximately 35 acres, makes sense. Most of our commission walked the site to see what was involved. Based on what we saw, based on what Jim Sullivan explained to us at the time with his plans, his intentions, we believe that his request is reasonable. And some, I guess it was Jim who had said first that that property was identified in the Economic Development Plan of 2004. And first and foremost, I want to point out the reasons why we think it should be approved is that any septic or natural boundaries are going to determine what can be built there. So whether it's homes, whether it's retail, it's not going to be a panacea there because you have natural limitations. And however it's zoned, they are there. They're not going away. The second is, and this was alluded to by Jim also in the 2004 economic development plan, as well as the POCD, 2002, that the west end of Route 1 is underdeveloped. It's the last area really of town that can be done without really causing a lot of damage to the character of the town, the natural environment, and other things there. And then the options are here for the commission, is what's going to be done with the property. If nothing's done, nothing gets built. There's no revenue to the town. There's limited farming on it. There is some. So then if houses are built, potentially you could have something there that's going to be more of a demand on town services than the retail would be. So you could end up costing the town more than you'd be getting in tax revenue. And from an economic development standpoint, we're very concerned about increasing the tax base so that it spreads the cost of running the town among a greater population. And then the other is to allow the zone change, which would permit commercial activity within reasonable limits, as I said, and would add to the town's tax base without putting a big drain on the town's services. We believe that it is the highest and best use for the property. As already said here, is that the TS2 zone would be consistent with other zones already in Route 1 West. There's already a TS2 zone nearby. Across the street is the MUC1. So again, it's consistent. And the last reason we're going to go and say is that we think it really would be, it could be developed with minimal harm to the wetlands, to any of the natural resources there, and without really disturbing the character of that part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Brian Malone, again, Economic Development Coordinator. There's always a danger when you go second, because you can easily just say ditto or try to pick up on a few things that maybe weren't highlighted. I don't think I'm talking out of school, Jim, if I mentioned that over time the Sullivan family had looked at selling the whole tract off, the whole development as R7, and had not a strong interest for that to try to do it as a residential development type property. So over this last year or so, we've been in multiple discussions as people have come forward looking. My office gets calls often from realtors or other users that might be looking for 3, 4, 5 acres. And I have to keep shaking my head saying we don't have any open land to be developed. So I can't tell you how many, but it's more than 1 and less than 10 in the last year or so that have at least called and inquired looking for additional space to build. So then collectively, Jim and I started looking at some options, and as he said, we met with various people in town hall and explored different uses, different thoughts. Yes, the current potential tenant maybe is the catalyst, so we started looking at their use and ideas and then carved off this roughly 35 or so acres to fit that. If you look again through our plans, residents have been asking for more economic development in the town. Just to put some perspective, we have about 36,000 acres in town. Just about 1,200 acres is identified for commercial and industrial. There's less than 100 acres left in town to be developed for commercial and industrial, and that includes some other privately owned pieces of property that haven't become available for sale or development. So in perspective, 1,200 out of 36,000, and just as a comparison, there's probably 8,500 plus acres that are open space designation. So when you look at what we're trying to do with the tax base and grow it, we're working from a small number to begin with. So this particular piece of property, Route 1 visibility, key for all the different commercial applications that we talked about. The TS2 zone, as Steve mentioned, if you go further down on Route 1, there are other sections that are TS2, so we think there's some continuity that makes sense there. You know, when we look at what it is currently zoned with the housing, you know, if you're looking at this 30 or 35 acres and it's roughly we could be looking at 17 or 18 houses, plus or minus. And if you look at the whole 80-acre tract that's here that he's looking at, and I don't want to confuse the issue, but a development of even 40 homes in Guilford would be considered large scale. And generally speaking, in the last few years, we've demonstrated as a town we're not looking for that kind of development. And if, just as a comparison, you go out to the east side of Route 1, that's TS zoning. It's not TS2, it's TS, but it has many similar commercial uses. So when you look at from about the Place Restaurant and the Shoreline Plaza going east, that's about TS. So we're talking on the opposite ends of Route 1 on the borders of Guilford. So I think there's some logic that makes sense there. So with that, from my role in the Economic Development Committee and the coordinator, I'd like to support this request for rezone.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, just, in terms of the differences between TS and TS2, do you still think that TS2 has a logic and makes sense if it also includes zoning for adult video stores? It does not. Only TS does.
TS2.
TS2 is proposed.
The Table 5 amendments
The adult facilities.
currently
TS2.
contain adjustments for TS2 to include adult video stores. And I believe that the zoning commission has done that in order to limit it in town, because there have been some cases where, retail can go anywhere, and it is retail. There's been some really knockdown, drag-out fights across the state involving adult video stores. Our adjustments to TS2 may soon include adult video stores in that zoning designation.
Well, I mean, I think the drafters of that have to take that into account.
The drafters,
Right.
yes, the drafters have taken it into account, and they've chosen
Right,
TS2
but-
up to this point.
Right, but right now, the application before us
You want
is
to put an
not.
adult movie theater on the site.
No,
It's not permitted.
Yeah, right, yeah, right. No, the thing is that if we both approve this and then approve our adjustments to our zoning code as it stands now, adult video stores will be allowed on this site because it is already
If you
zoned
approve both of them.
TS2.
If you
That's right,
approve
if
both of
both
them.
were approved.
Right. Sure, Mr. Cronin.
Can I just address that?
Absolutely.
I never thought I'd be talking about XXX stuff in Guilford, but for the record, Tom Cronin for the applicant. It's my understanding that if we're entitled to grandfathering based upon the date of our application, that's my starting point. That's not my ending point.
Okay.
We start with, if this is approved, subsequent amendments we're grandfathered in. However, if the use has not been established before the new regulations go in, I'm not sure that we're...
And the new use will be allowed.
I'm not sure that the new use is allowed. I mean,
It will be.
If you're in
It will be
a
allowed.
zone and the zone change allows a new use, you're saying if you have...
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about allowing a new use with the...
Correct.
I thought you were taking the use away.
Correct.
No,
No.
we're adding it.
Adding-
wants to
Wanna sit down now?
XXX.
In order
I'm even more surprised that we're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about this in Guilford.
It's
I
been
mean-
considered to eliminate it for the rest of the town. And
I know
I
that-
wasn't involved in the drafting of it, but I mean, it's a very useful addition to the code in order to limit it in other retail areas. But it is being proposed to be added for TS2 zones.
Right.
Let me first say that we haven't had any inquiries for XXX theaters in Guilford, okay? That's the first thing. So, And honestly, I hadn't thought about that use or implication, but I think maybe we have to keep it in perspective and discuss it in the next section and debate the value of including it in TS2. You know, we were trying to avoid any kind of spot zoning when we looked at this initial piece, because we were looking initially at only the few acres. And then we said, from a practical sense, to avoid what appears to be spot zoning, we encompassed a larger number of acres. So the point you're bringing up maybe would be better suited in the next discussion when we get into proper uses or proper locations. Personally, I'm not advocating it and wouldn't support it. That would be one use I would stand up here and say, I prefer not to have that in Guilford.
That wouldn't increase the tax base.
No, we don't get sales tax much. I mean, you know. Yes.
Well, in any event, why don't we keep to the application? So are there anybody else wishing to speak in favor?
Mr. Chairman, we did refer this application as required to the regional
We
planning
will. I'm going to
agency.
read those in at the end, and then
Okay.
if anyone wants to rebut it or agree with it, we'll allow that.
Good evening. My name is Rob Sonicson. I'm Waldo & Associates. Our office is at 89 State Street here in Guilford. I've known Jim for many years. We've talked numerous times about what could be done with this parcel. There are a number of constraints on it, and in my opinion, this is the best possible change that can be made. It gives more flexibility. There is an opportunity for development in the west end of town, commercial development. It's something that many of us have been hoping we'd be able to generate, and I just wanted to indicate that it makes tremendous amount of sense to me, and I think that the wrinkles in the TS2 zone, I think there is some flexibility there, but there are many really very positive uses that this parcel can be put to under the TS2 zone, and it's the best zone that you could be chosen for. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Yes, please.
Barb Cameron, 130 Crooked Hill Road. I would speak in favor of this zone change for a few different reasons. Number one, I'd love to have an agricultural retail store in this town. It's something that's been long gone and needs to come back. The other thing is, as far as retail goes in this town, they would not only be paying real estate taxes, but they would also be paying personal property taxes on their shelving, their computers, everything, which generates revenue for this town. Maybe some people would like to have more housing, but the housing is starting to tax the services in this town. And we do need more retail businesses in this town to start to turn that table a little bit. Especially with the new school going in, people are going to get hit, so we need to bring something in to offset that. I do know this property, again, I grew up in this town. It was all farm, unfortunately, as many people know. The people get older, they cannot maintain it. It's harder for people to farm full-time in this town, not just this town, in the state, because of the cost of farming and that. So I would recommend that you consider approving the TS2 to at least bring something back into this town.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Seeing none, I'll ask, is there anybody wishing to speak against the application? Sir, we'll start with you, and then we'll...
Frank Farrell, 159 Granite Road.
Can you come up where I can hear you?
Sure. Just ask you to consider flipping it around a little bit. There's the west end of Route 1, which you're saying is the last bit of town available for commercial development. However, a lot of it's already zoned, and there's a lot of commercial development a little further down, beginning with Moose Hill, going down eastward from there. So I would posit that it's the last part of Route 1 that has a natural appeal to it. As you drive from the Guilford-Brantford line east, you're going through a natural appearance until you hit Moose Hill, and then there's the Broadway Nursery property, which is available now, by the way, and other properties down the road which have, many of them have available storefronts, et cetera, in them already. So earlier we heard a conversation about the character of the town, and I just suggest that you consider the character of the town as you enter it on any of the major roadways. And this end of Route 1 being one of the, at least the last part of Route 1 that has a natural appearance to it for a while. Once you hit Moose Hill and you continue on, it becomes commercial appearance, and that extends all the way to the other end of Route 1, to the Madison line. So I question the need, but I don't have your statistics and so forth that might consider otherwise. But anyway.
Okay, thank you for your input. Sir.
Mike Tappas. I basically echo the same comments, and I also have concern over traffic.
What's your name?
Mike Tappas.
I just saw your last name.
P-A-P-P-A-S. I know traffic studies have been done in the past. Traffic right now, at Route 1 and 22 is a nightmare. So we start adding more traffic into that area. The lighting is not the greatest on Route 1. And I just have a concern, as you also stated, we're changing the character of the town. It is a farming community to a point, right? And do we really want to look like Route 1 of Brantford? I don't, right? And I don't know how the others do. And I don't want to discourage development, but on the other hand, I think we need to look at it as a reason to look at it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Gail Pappas, 200 Jamestown Drive, not Road Drive. It bothers me that you would create a parcel for development that landlocks additional property owned by the same person. If the only access to the rest of that 80 acres is off of Jamestown Drive, it just seems like it isn't well thought out. If you were going to develop that property, why wouldn't you create a road through that property to the rest of this property rather than wreaking havoc with a windy road and a quiet development? And also, this parcel is not near 57 and it's not near 56. We're dead in the middle where 22 is. It's not a very well-traveled road. Nobody goes on that. Very few people go on that portion of Route 1. They're going to 56 or 57.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak against? Yes, ma'am.
Marietta Daddio, Notch Hill Road. I am the owner of 15 Notch Hill Road in North Branford. Notch Hill, as I'm sure you people who live in the area know, is a 2-lane state highway and a very highly trafficked road by heavy-duty commercial vehicles as well as automobiles. Route 1 is also a 2-lane, highly traveled main thoroughfare. It is common practice that vehicles entering Notch Hill Road from Guilford hardly slow down at the yield sign. It's a dangerous situation, to say the least, when trying to exit the driveways of the first 3 homes, especially on Notch Hill. The last thing this area needs is more of the same traffic. To grant a zone change of this nature, a TS2, would only increase the current adverse conditions. This parcel's past use as farmland better serves not only the town of Guilford, but also the town of North Branford as well. I ask that Guilford take into consideration its plan of development when a zone change such as this is requested. The farmland classification appears to be more in line with the town's current plan of development. I ask the following question. Does the town have a current plan for this area of Route 1, which takes into consideration the neighboring towns of North Branford and Branford. Does Guilford not already have areas that are zoned TS2 for commercial use, which are more in line with its current plan of development? To grant a zone change from R7 to TS2 in this area, to me, certainly appears as spot zoning. There isn't much in that area that is already zoned TS2. And especially since this parcel is bounded by residential homes, not only in Guilford, but along the North Branford line, as well as by farmland to the east and south of it. In addition, another issue to take into consideration is that there are no sewers or water currently serving this property. The parcel owner or owners state in their request for a zone change that the TS2 district is a commercial zoning district designed to permit a wide variety of commercial uses better to serve the local community. I disagree that a zone change from R7 to TS2, which allows a wide variety of commercial uses, would blend with the adjacent residential area and the natural landscape, as they also state. The allowable residential use in an R7 zone seems to be relatively simple. TS2 zoning, on the other hand, permits a wide variety of commercial uses. 26, if I may remind you, according to the Town of Guilford Zoning Code, Chapter 273. Those 26 uses include, and I'm only going to read a few of them, retail stores, business and professional offices, financial institutions, which include drive-throughs, restaurants, excluding drive-through service, retail clothes cleaning and/or laundering establishments, entertainment facilities, including movie theaters and playhouses, motor vehicle repair facilities by special permit, okay? Motor vehicle fuel sales, only in combination with convenience stores. Recreational facilities, including gyms and physical fitness establishments and studios for dance and theatrical instruction. Veterinary clinics and hospitals. Light manufacturing and product assemblies. And you're considering adult video stores? Remember that once the zone is given, anything that is allowed in that zoning can go in there, no matter what the property owner thinks that a person who wants to buy this property is going to put it there. They can put any one of the allowable uses. The allowable residential use seems to be relatively simple. Please bear in mind that once a zone change is granted, any one of the 26 permitted uses would be allowed. More recently, we have witnessed a decline in residential sales and an increase in foreclosures, as well as an increase in business closures, all due to various reasons. I cannot envision how this zone change would better serve this area or the local community. First and foremost, what I believe should be taken into consideration is what is the highest and best use of this land. Obviously, the highest and best use over many years has been farm. It should remain as such. In looking at the proposed map that was submitted, it appears to show areas that are designated wetlands. Any development within proximity to these wetlands would be detrimental from an environmental standpoint. example. In closing, I would like to say that it is my belief, given all of the above concerns, a change of this kind would have a negative effect not only on Guilford, but also on the neighboring communities of North Branford and Branford as well. I therefore am requesting that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission deny the zone change request. And I wish to thank the members of this commission for their time in listening to my concerns. I would also like to ask the commission, do you have in your possession a letter from the town of North Branford?
We do, and we'll read that into the record.
I would just like to read one little excerpt. In conclusion, there are major concerns over the wide range of conflicting land uses allowed within this proposed zoning category, along with the possibility of being built at a maximum 55% total lot coverage on the proposed 35 acres of land. The real potential exists for traffic, drainage, and noise impacts to the existing residential neighborhood within North Branford, and especially for high-level septic and well usage impacts to the westerly surrounding sensitive environmental areas of wetlands, water bodies, and water courses in North Branford. Finally, the North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission requests that you carefully evaluate the physical features and constraints of the area on whether it can realistically support this type of zoning district. We request that you do not approve any zone change application until a planning study is done for this section of Guilford for a more comprehensive planning approach that includes the use of smart growth principles for the evaluation of any future development in this section of Guilford.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak against the application? Okay, we did receive a few letters. First one is from the South Central Regional Planning Commission, dated July 15th, regards to this application. Thank you for sharing the proposed zoning map amendment. The Regional Planning Commission reviewed the proposal at its meeting on Thursday, July 11th. By resolution, the RPC has determined that the proposed zoning map amendment has the potential to cause negative traffic and drainage impacts due to the size of the parcel and the proximity to environmentally sensitive areas located in North Branford. Please contact us if you have any questions. In addition, we did receive a letter from the Town of North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission dated July 22nd. The lady just read the last two paragraphs, so I will not repeat those, but the letter is as follows. The North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission is requesting this letter be entered into the public record on the above zoning map amendment application from Sullivan Farms LLC. The North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission requests that you consider the following facts and concerns in your evaluation of the zoning map amendment. This northwesterly quadrant of Route 1 is entirely in residential zoning. At least half of the 35-acre site is identified as prime agricultural soil. See attached Guilford GIS farmland soil map number 1. The state of Connecticut has adopted position that these areas are an important agricultural resource and a valuable economic asset of the state, especially for its future. There are large surrounding sensitive environmental areas to the west, east, and southwest of the subject property, which have wetlands, water bodies, and water courses, and then it references a few GIS maps. The proposed zone change is not consistent with Guilford's current plan of conservation and development because there is no recommendation for any future commercial development in this particular section of Route 1. Based on the property's location from other town commercial development, the proposal does not support the principles of smart growth. The proposed land area lacks the availability of public utilities of water and sewer service to accommodate the proposed TS2 zoning district's extensive variety of permitted commercial uses, retail stores, offices, housing, restaurants, retail, clothing, cleaning, etc., and other special permit uses such as places of worship, motor vehicle repair facilities, gasoline convenience stores, which I think we already talked about. We can't have those there. what might be developed on the total 35 acres. Most of these uses have a potential.
Well, light manufacturing and product assembly
Right,
was
was
also
also on that list.
Right,
that was already mentioned, right. Most of these uses have the potential of high volume water and septic usage. The TS2 zoning regulations allow maximum impervious surface of 55%. The total coverage by impervious surfaces, including buildings, driveways, and parking areas, shall not exceed this percentage of lot area. And finally, the state NEMO map of the Guilford, Connecticut sub-regional basins and surface water flow directions indicate that part of the subject property is within the Connecticut DEP designated sub-regional basin 5111, which flows into the North Branford tributes of the Branford River. Although development on the proposed zoning location may be at a higher elevation and be actually outside this basin, the subject site is surrounded to the west and the east by wetlands and watercourses that flow into Basin 5111. See attached GIS map. Drainage systems, well water usage, and septic systems, especially at a maximum development scenario, will have a negative impact to the health and stability of these adjacent environmentally sensitive areas and their ecosystems. It's signed by the chairman of the North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission. Would there any final comments from the applicants or anybody else with regard to this application? Okay, why don't we go with you first, and then we'll go around.
Something for the record.
Yes, absolutely.
Had indicated, and I think that letter indicated that there was no water service on the property. There is water service from the Connecticut Water Company. I don't think it's not Connecticut, it's the one that services Guilford.
Regional Water Authority.
First town water.
No, it's Connecticut.
It's Connecticut Water.
CWC.
CWC.
I think there's New Haven Water comes to Route 22, and they've joined the two systems. Connecticut Water comes from Clinton.
Okay.
And terminates there.
But you do have water.
We do have water and sewer, or not sewer, gas.
Gas.
as well.
Okay, Mr. Cronin, do you want to make a comment? Then we'll go to...
If I might, Mr. Chairman, again, just in the spirit of correcting the record, number one, I gave you chapter and verse out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. I find it inconceivable.
Business card.
I'm sorry?
Business card, you gave.
Well, but I gave you the pages, so you go
I
find
know,
it.
I'm gonna go look it up.
The fact that...
It's a long document.
How long is the document, actually? You
It's
remember?
about 82 pages.
82, okay, and you got it on.
Someplace in the other other than the 5 pages I looked at, there must be
Maybe something else going on.
must be conclusive proof that the zone change is antithetical to the Plan of Conservation and Development. I couldn't find it, and the North Branford Planning and Zoning Commission didn't bother to tell you where you could find it. The record here tonight, I think, shows that it is consistent, number one. Number two, the comment was made, the term was used, spot zoning. Is there any member of the commission who thinks this is spot zoning? And if the answer to that is yes, I have no choice but to launch into a defense that it's not. This is clearly not spot zoning. You can zone something commercial, and when it's contiguous to another commercial area, when you zone something that's transitional between a commercial area and a residential area, I don't think that any court of competent jurisdiction is going to find that to be spot zoning. The third point I guess I want to make, and now I'm out of my depth, but my recollection from having done this for about 25 years, the issue about wastewater treatment and septic and so on, if the alternative is to develop this parcel at its maximum residential development, my rule of thumb, which I may be not recalling correctly, was residences typically generate more wastewater than commercial uses on a like-for-like basis. So sensitivity to those kinds of concerns in the absence of sewers, in addition to the tax base issue, would seem to militate in favor of going in a commercial direction. So those are just offered as possible corrections to the understanding. Truly, the thing about, I did read the letter from North Branford. I read it a couple weeks ago. I read it again yesterday. I went looking today in the Plan of Conservation and Development for any evidence to support it, and frankly, the only evidence I find contradicts it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I got a question. Attorney Cronin, real quick. Way back at the beginning of the discussion, Walter here pointed out that, or asked George, the number of residential uses permitted under, or residential units under the R7, it's 20-something. Under the TS2, it's
200. Well, if we simply multiply, as we said,
Oh,
6 times 35, we have 210
So
is
that's
what's
pretty-
being asked
That would be a
for.
potential, pretty intensive.
Residential.
Yeah.
Residential, well, that's, I guess, the point that I'm suggesting.
But that's under TS2, that would be permitted. Right now, under 7, it would be 20 houses.
But
And
keep
then you
in-
talk about
well,
septic uses, and I want to make sure I
It would be
understood
no
what you-
more than 17 currently, and under TS2, it would be 210, no more than 210.
keep in mind, this is an application for a zone change. There's
Correct.
another application that would follow on this, which would be, I'll call it a lot division. I don't want to call it a subdivision because I'm not sure it's that. But there's some sort of a lot split going on. That's got to be done. And then you're going to have site plans and potentially special exceptions. And that's where you get down to, you know, the individualized uses and protective measures and so on. So I'm not saying that's not important, I'm just saying that the focus tonight is more limited than that. Yes, it sets the stage, it's kind of the, you know, without which nothing, sine qua non, but this is just a zone change application at this point. And there will be multiple other opportunities for this board to rule on specific uses and impacts and so on, including traffic lighting and all of that kind of stuff.
Sir, you're asking this commission tonight to vote for a vast number of uses that are allowed under TS2 because the focus tonight is more limited?
Is what?
You're asking this commission this evening to vote for a vast number of uses that are allowed under TS2 because the focus tonight is more limited?
I don't understand the question.
You said that the focus tonight is more limited.
It's just a
And
zone
that-
change application.
That's right, it's just a zone change application, and later on, specific uses will be developed.
Right.
You
Each of
don't
which will
want
at least the
to,
site plan.
you don't want to tailor this request to those uses. You would like to do that later, after this commission has agreed to zone 35 acres for all of these uses.
I have no choice but to do that. I can't come in with a site plan that's not permitted by the regs. I'm required to follow that. This is actually, for those of you who were here, this is exactly the procedure that we followed at the Guilford, I'll call it the Guilford Plaza, the Shoreline Plaza, the big Y is. The regulation was written, and that was challenged by neighbors, including a court challenge. And then there was a subsequent special exception application. That was rigorously scrutinized, and that one, if I remember correctly, I think that one went to court too. But I can't come in here with a site plan to do something that the zone doesn't allow.
That's right,
And
the appropriate.
Big Y, that Shoreline Plaza is also zoned to TS2?
Oh, that's a different zone classification.
What is it zoned?
I don't remember that.
It's shopping center.
SC, shopping center.
SC. Thank you.
That's just important to keep straight, because there were people who testified specific to a veiled allusions to a specific tenant that people were excited about, but now you're saying we shouldn't even think about that because that may not happen at all, right? I mean, we could have a TS2 without this veiled illusion of a wonderful tenant that people seem to be in favor of. That might not happen.
I guess that's true.
Right, okay, so that's our concern is this 35 acre properly zoned TS2?
Well, that's really is the issue. Yes, sir.
John Daniel, 15 Nutshell Road. I'm a bit confused now.
Oh, sorry.
And I guess my question goes to the gentleman up here. This elusive tenant, okay, I call it elusive because no one knows that it's actually anyone that is really interested in this property. If they back out, then it's wide open, is what you're saying.
Even if they don't back out the other 35
Even
acres?
if they don't back out,
Yeah, I mean,
the rest of the property is wide open?
Yes, absolutely. They can do whatever
So
those,
I can put a triple X movie theater in there.
Not yet.
not yet.
Not
Yeah, I
yet.
was thinking about putting a golf on that site.
Not yet.
Wait for it.
Not yet. If you think you can do it and make money, you're right, you could do it.
I want to clear up the confusion that I have, okay, that it's being focused in on an elusive tenant that's going in on 4 acres.
Well, I mean, I can tell you personally, I'm not factoring that into my decision because we have to take into account that it could be any one of these permitted uses. Okay.
Thank you.
Sir.
point of clarification for the board that you may or may not know. The property, the 100 acres south of this site, that I believe is owned by the same applicant,
Mhm.
right? 100 acres south of Route 1.
The MUC property, MUC1, I
That's
think.
mixed
Yeah.
use. And on Broadway or Old Broadway and the Montana's Horse Farm, would you happen to know if any of those properties would be capable of supporting this particular application?
Well, they might, but that's not really a factor that we, I mean, he has every right to come in here and ask for his property to zone it whatever he wants. We don't have to grant it,
Right.
okay? But he has the right to ask for
It's
it.
just a point of curiosity as to whether or not those other...
It might, maybe they've looked at it and they don't like it, maybe the price isn't right, maybe it's not big enough, maybe, who knows, but,
Do you know if there's zone TS2?
well, we can tell you what,
Marked it as CD.
it's a different type of commercial zone, but it's zone commercial development.
Thank you.
Any other, yes, sir?
I think the only other comment that I want to make is the attorney that was up here.
Attorney Cronin.
Made a comment relative to the septic and the fact that of the amount of, that the property is not conducive to a lot of septic. But then you turn around and if you turn around and you make it TS2 and you can get your 200 and something living units on there, I mean, one contradicts.
Well, you
the
won't,
other, you know?
even if you could get 500 units on there under the zoning code, if the perk tests and the state regulations and the town regulations wouldn't permit it, so in other words, if it's really rocky soil, I don't care whether there's 600 permitted, you're not going to get 600 if you can't meet the standards for the septic system.
Anything that large would have to go through the state.
Well, right, but
The Department of Environmental Protection.
my point is that no matter what the zoning code allows in terms of density, you may not be able to get there if you don't have sufficient drainage or sufficient space to put the septic systems in. And that's what the town engineer is going to look at that, the town health director, and if it's large enough, the state has to sign off on it. For example, we had a problem where Anthony's is, the restaurant, they wanted to expand, and they couldn't, they were permitted by the zoning regulations, but they couldn't expand because they couldn't get a large enough septic system in. That could also happen here. So that's why when you say, yeah, we could put in 600 units, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. It's going to come down to, can you really get the septic system to support it? I don't know.
Our regulations only provide an upper limit of what's possible right now. That upper limit is perhaps 17 or 18 units.
We don't know. I mean, it depends on the soil, depends on a lot of things. Yes,
But
ma'am?
it also, does it not also depend on whether or not sewers are available?
Well, that's right. If there's sewers, you're going to probably get a higher density.
Also, you say there's 35 acres, okay, you're talking 17 based on a 2-acre per home,
Right.
okay? That is not necessarily so either because of the wetlands and.
That's right. And we're not going to know that until they come in with a site plan or another proposal.
And then you need a road in there.
Well, that's right. And that's all going to be.
You're not going to get 17.
Well, that's right, they may not be able to, and we would take a look at that at the time that came before us. So this isn't the end of it, okay? If this is approved, they're still going to need to come back with at least a site plan to approve the specific use. All right, any other, yes, sir?
Maybe you can explain me, what kind of controls, if any, are part of this process when construction begins? I guess I'm, on anything, I'm just talking.
Well, they're going to have to come in with an approved site plan, an engineer is going to have to engineer it. We're
I
going
mean,
to
if
have
you
to
look at
see.
some of the properties going east on Route 1 there, I mean, they're horrible looking, and, you know.
Well, I mean, I can't.
I mean, I hate to see, what kind of controls does the town build?
Guilford has
They have a design review guide which looks at the structure. It's composed of architects, landscape architects, other people. They review the architecture of it to try to ensure. But at the end of the day, we only have so much control. I mean, how much you like it if I said, you know, this week I think you can only paint your house green. And you, I think you can only paint
Well,
yellow.
that's a regulation, as you know.
Well, no, my point
Well,
though
don't make a
is,
facetious point.
well, it's not facetious. My point is that beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so good architecture or bad architecture to some degrees in the eye of the beholder, just like trying to regulate that. So, next question. Yes, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to kind of make a statement. This family here has 35 acres that they're looking to do do something positive with. Yes, it was a farm, and I understand that, but how can, I find it hard for people to come out and say that you own this land and we only want you to do this on this land. I honestly feel that the people have the right to be able to do things to their land to improve it. If it's sitting there fallow, you're getting nothing but Russian olive, you're getting overgrowth of all kinds of things and everything. How is that making the land productive? It's not. And it's like, so many times we hear, not in my backyard, okay? I'm not saying that there aren't concerns by people, but I don't think that they should be penalized of doing something with their property, because at this point in time, that is the highest and best use for their property. I just, it bothers me that this happens more than not.
Okay, thank you. George?
Just wanted to clarify one point about the plan of conservation and development, so-called. It's not just a single document. The Guilford Plan of Conservation and Development that was referred to, adopted in 2002, has actually been amended by this commission and the Board of Selectmen, I think at least 6 times, with appendices or addendums, including the Economic Development Plan that was referenced to 2004, was actually approved as part of the Plan of Conservation and Development. There was a transportation plan that was adopted pursuant to that, growth management plan, the Town Center South plan, and several others. So it's really a continuous process. It's not just the 2002 Plan of Conservation and Development.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? Yes,
I would
ma'am.
like to make a comment, okay, based on Ms. Herman's comment. Number one, we're here, I think, the people who are against it, to protect what we have in a residential area. Not only to protect what we have, but to protect the environment as well, okay? I don't know if there's anyone in this room that remembers that when there was a parcel of land that was going up for a zone change on Notch Hill Road that is currently owned by Miller, which happens to be one house in the west side of Notch Hill Road.
And you're talking about Bill Miller?
I'm sorry?
Bill Miller?
Yes. What they wanted to do was they wanted to change that zone from residential to industrial. The person that wanted to come in there was a manufacturer. They manufactured the coil line to telephones. I'm sure we're all old enough in this room to know the phones that had the coil line. Our point at the time was, though the corner was a business, the rest of it, okay, was residential. If you're looking for commercial property or industrial property, then go where it is already zoned. The person withdrew, the property got sold as residential property. But the person that was going for the development for the industrial change zone decided to go down on Route 80 and put the place of business down there where it was already zoned for that use. If you go down on Route 80 where the business was Auttac, and you look at that place now, the owner has since passed away. The daughter did not continue. Needless to say, everything is the cell phones now, so you don't need the coil phones, and it is an eyesore. We would have been stuck with that had that gone through. We fought it. Luckily, it didn't. I'm asking you to really consider this.
Good, thank you for your input. Okay, anybody else making a comment? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. How much time do we have left on the, all right, why don't we take a break and we'll change the DVD now, so we'll go off the record and then we'll come back. What I propose to do is we will vote on the first two items, just deliberate the vote on those, and then we'll open the public hearing on the other item. Okay, we're off the record. Okay, we're back on the record. Folks, I'm just going to announce, in case anybody's here for the amendment to 273.2, the word usage, or the amendment to Table 5, we're going to move that out to the next meeting due to the late hour. So those two will not be taken up. If you're just here for those, you don't have to stay. Okay, let me get a motion to approve the revised agenda.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, if I can get a motion on the Agricultural Society. I'd like to read one. Peter, or?
All right, I'll read it. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a special permit revision for the Guilford Agricultural Society, Inc. at 111 Lovers Lane, map 40, lot 138, for the construction of 2 barns as shown on general location survey for Guilford Agricultural Society dated September 3rd, 2013, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, and as heard at public hearing on September 4th, 2013. The special permit revision is approved with the following conditions: that there's really no rock concerts, and that's about it. The special permit is approved based on the plan.
You can't ban rock concerts.
Well, I mean, basically, you know, it would be based on the conditions that are dated in the May 22nd, 1989 letter.
So I'm going to second that for the fun of
Well,
starting the discussion on it.
There's still more to go.
Yep. The special permit is
Sorry.
approved based upon the finding that it will have no adverse impact on adjoining properties and is consistent with the zoning code of the town. It is effective September 13, 2013, and upon filing with the town clerk.
Okay, you'll hear a second.
And I'll second them, but I think it's going to need some further discussion.
Okay, why don't we start the discussion then, since we have a second? David, why don't you go first?
Well, I have a merit question, but I'll go back to that when we can get to that. Let's beat through this motion a little bit. I think the relatively nuanced solution, or elegant maybe, solution that George came up with the notion of limiting the specific uses of these 2 buildings to, well, what we were going to say?
Through the end of...
Guilford Fair,
Well,
or are we going to...
Through the end of October, we
The
said.
events that are booked to the end of the season.
Okay, so which were the Oktoberfest, something involving Adams School, and the Guilford Fair.
Right.
And those uses of these 2 buildings are limited specifically only to those 3 uses.
And then what that would do is,
And then we wanted a second condition that,
well, that would force...
we thought that they would have to come back to us
Right,
anyway.
that would force
Okay.
the applicant to come back prior to, I guess, the spring with proposed
to the special
modifications.
permit, And that might be the means for the discussion amongst the interested
Exactly,
parties.
exactly. So I
Right,
think
so-
that's what the leaning was at the time.
It looks like late October, the 20th would be the final event.
Yeah, through the end of October, they would be permitted to use the buildings, and then after that, they would not be permitted to use them until they came back for a new special permit, which modified the uses, okay? And that allows them to get the special permit, allows them to get the CO, allows them to use it for the rest of the year, and then we'll take up the issue of what the objections seem to be. That could be there's plenty of time to work that out and come back with something, and if it's not possible to work it out, then we'll come back here and we'll make the decision.
So I think that's what the wording, for lack of a better, I mean, I think Don Ed's going to beat that into form for us.
Well, let me just ask, Peter, you made the motion. Are you okay with that, or do you want to stand with the motion as it is?
I'm okay with it, but you know, I think we really have to look in terms of what the fairgrounds are to this community. If you drive to Guilford, the first sign you see, it says this is an agricultural community, okay? The Guilford, I mean, I heard tonight about the fact that they have the Lobster Fest, okay? The Lobster Fest is a Rotarian event. It is the biggest moneymaker for the Rotary, and all the money that they make goes to this town for women's health, for scholarships. I think it's a positive event. You have Taste of Guilford, okay? What is the Taste of Guilford? That is a Chamber of Commerce event to help businesses to basically sell their restaurants and so forth. There are numerous things that have occurred for many, many years at the fairgrounds, and I think it's a positive for the community. I wouldn't sit here and try to be very restrictive in what they do. I've lived there for 20 years, close to 20 years, and I've never seen anything negative come out of that fair. And so I don't really want to handcuff them, and I don't want to see them going through, having to jump through hoops in order to continue to do what they've done. It's a very good service organization for this town, and I think we should recognize it.
Good.
So we're not amending the motion, we're sticking with the no rock concerts motion?
I mean, that's the only thing that I would object. I don't think I'd want the Rolling Stones performing in that area, but other than that.
I thought, but we also had testimony from the applicant that essentially said that they are currently, as they've been using the property, have been in violation of their special permit. I don't think we're handcuffing anybody by saying, you really ought to come back to us to fix so that you can properly use, since you've testified that you're using it in a way that's not consistent with your special permit.
Yeah, I think we're getting, again, involved with verbal gymnastics, because I don't see them misusing the property. I really have not seen it. And I live in that area. I've heard every single thing that has happened in 20 years, and there's nothing that really has upset me in the entire time that they've run.
All right, well, how does anybody else feel about the motion as it exists?
I actually, I agree with a lot of Peter's points that weren't incorporated into the motion. However, I do think that we should restrict the buildings, restrict the use of the building until through the end of the season, for these events. I do think that George's answer was elegant. I think that our best course of action, because even though, yes, this original 1989 special permit was vague, it does not really cover everything that is really happening in that space. And I think that the neighbors have a lot of valid concerns. I am very worried about being too onerous for an all-volunteer organization that does a huge amount of the heavy lifting to develop and promote the character of Guilford. And therefore,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so therefore, go ahead, please.
What I can envision happening is that we have this very vague specification of uses allowed, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to actually administer or enforce it. Because we don't, and I can envision a situation occurring where somebody calls like on a Monday morning after a weekend event saying this activity that's going on there now is a violation of the special permit, and then Reggie's trying to figure out whether or not it really is a violation of the special permit or not, and so then she has to write them a letter, and it can become quite a chore that no one's going to be happy with it. In the interest of a more expedient administration of what's allowed there, and I'm not comfortable with the town actually administering what's going on there either, but we need to come up with some kind of more careful definition of what's allowed and what isn't, so that when issues do arise in the future, and I feel that they will, we can respond to them appropriately and be able to enforce whatever the conditions are. So I think the gist of the idea of the motion is that it forces, to some extent, or at least encourages, the creation of a more enforceable set of conditions relating to what's allowed there and what isn't.
I mean, I'm in
Maybe.
favor
I'm
of-
not real optimistic that we can actually do that, but hopefully we can.
Well,
We need
I'm-
more specificity.
I'm in
Yeah,
favor of
certainly.
getting it cleaned up, because the way it is now, it's too vague to enforce.
No question.
And there's a lot of ways to slip things in and out, and we're gonna get into a mess. So what,
Yes.
I think the best way to try to approach this is the way we originally had said, which is to allow this so that this gets permitted and is in use through the rest of the year. Gives both the neighbors and the board of directors time to work this out. If they can work out something, both sides entering into this thing with fair minds, that's great. And if they can't, then my suggestion would be that the Agricultural Society come in with their special permit next year for what they want, and we'll make the decision based on what we hear. But if both sides can come to a meeting of the minds and what's appropriate and what isn't, I'm fine with that, as long as it's not hyper-technical and we, get into a real enforcement problem. So we got to be realistic about this.
Right.
And keep this at a level which is clear, but there's always going to be probably some ambiguity down the pike. But I think what we have now is very difficult to enforce.
No question.
And I think, I think David and Walter are right. There was some testimony that the applicant said, we probably aren't in conformity with everything that's there. So I don't like, that makes it tough for both the neighbors and the Agricultural Society. If somebody comes into Reggie, now you're the bad guy who has to go in and, arbitrate what's going on here and approve or disapprove, and it shouldn't come to that. So what I'm hoping is if the neighbors who have an issue with this and the society can meet, work this out, and come back, sometime later this year or early next year, and they've had time to work through this, we'll take it up at that time, and one way or another, it'll be settled. So one way or another, it'll be settled. I mean,
If you put this.
because if it's
include
not,
this
they
condition.
can't use the building anymore. So there's going to be something provided to get this moved off the center, and we'll settle it if the parties can't come to a
So
reasonable
does the
meeting.
motion include this this condition?
Well, that's what I want to get back to, is we have a motion on the table. If Peter wants to amend it, we can. If not, we'll take it up and we'll vote on it.
Well, we could amend it, so basically you want this special permit to run until the season's over, which is, you said October?
At the end of
Yeah, the buildings are approved, and the use is approved through the end of October.
Okay.
And then after that, the buildings cannot be used again until.
The two barns can be used until the end of October.
Right. Now, the other thing I would just want to be clear about is one they're using for storage.
Yes.
Okay, so I would also add into the conditions that the one that's being used for storage, that's okay to continue with its use as storage indefinitely.
Okay.
Event use.
Right, it's the event use that we're trying to restrict. So to the extent they're being used for storage, that's permitted.
Okay.
It would simply be the event usage they need to come back for after
Or
October.
can we just add that to the record, what you just said?
Okay, so we'll do that, and then then can I get a re-second?
I think I'm in
Okay.
favor of reseconding it.
Okay, now discussion on the new motion.
Let's vote on it.
It also allows the neighbors and the applicant to work it out in their off-season, which I think
If they can, and if not, then
As
we'll
much
work
as
it
they
out
can.
here. Right.
And I would
Any-
mention to.
This would be any events are permitted up until the end of October, and after that, there are no
No.
events.
Scheduled events.
Scheduled
Just-
events. All
okay.
currently scheduled events are
Which
permitted.
are the fair, the Oktoberfest, and there was something else that was mentioned?
Run.
Race, road race.
Whatever,
road race from Adams
whatever they
School.
have scheduled between now and October.
It's in the record. It's in
fine.
the record.
Okay.
From that point on, they can be used for storage only until they come back with a request to
Okay, that's clear.
modify the conditions of use there, which will also apply to this. And let me just also say, because I know this issue has come up, yes, these were built after the fact, but it's always been the policy of this commission, at least since I've been here, that we're not here to punish somebody unless there's a good showing that there's been a flagrant violation or an attempt to misrepresent something to this commission. We've always taken these applications as though the construction hadn't taken place, and we look at it as would it have been approved if the construction hadn't taken place, and we go forward from there. So I think we should apply that policy here as well. 'Cause I haven't heard any testimony other than the fact that I think they just didn't realize they needed to get these approvals. Okay, having said all that, are we ready for a vote? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, it's approved with those conditions. All right, moving forward, if we can get a motion on the Sullivan Farm LLC application.
I have a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission deny without prejudice a zoning map revision for Sullivan Farm LLC, map 8-3, lot 5, to change the approximately 35-acre parcel from R7 to TS2 as shown on a map prepared by the applicant dated 7/3/13, with yellow lines showing the area of proposed change, and as heard at a public hearing on September 4, 2013. The zoning map revision is denied based upon a finding that additional study is required before such a change can be made. The Commission directs the Route 1 West Study Committee to consider this change in the context of its comprehensive review of the Route 1 West area.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion.
We didn't discuss the Route 1 West study in the public hearing, but I think the commission is familiar with the fact that we have charged a committee to pursue that. I think Mr. Corbiere has agreed to serve on it. They will be begin meeting on the 17th of September, and they have an expeditious schedule to complete by the end of the holidays of this year, whatever that means, before the end of the year, their work.
The problem I have is that, that we do have an application pending before us that I believe came in prior to the announcement when that was formed.
Right.
And the other problem is we don't really know how long it's going to take. So what we would really do is be hamstringing this applicant for that amount of time if we were to hold them up.
No question.
So that's one issue. But, getting to the merits of this.
Right. And I just wanted to acquaint you with the fact that there is this committee. It's been formed. They do have a schedule. The committee members don't really know about it yet, but it's going to move forward.
It's going to move forward. The problem is we don't know how long and what impact, if any, it'll have on this property.
Correct.
So,
Well, in that case, I think I would like to amend my motion to state in the second paragraph, this zoning map revision is denied based upon a finding that this zone change does not conform to the Guilford Plan of Conservation and Development.
okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so let's get to the
Without
substance.
prejudice is in the first paragraph.
I can't vote for denial. It does comply, from my perspective, it does comply with the Plan of Conservation and Development. It's stated several times here in the meeting, testified to that fact, and I will not vote to deny this.
Do we have a copy of the Plan of Conservation and Development with us right now?
You also
I
don't
don't
have
have
the
it.
66
Probably not.
amendments either.
It's not something
Why
I
don't,
carry
why don't
around.
we go around the table in order? Peter, how do you feel?
I'm very pro-business, there's no question about it. I have reservations about taking a residential piece of property and turning it into a business venture without really knowing what could end up there. I mean, that is a concern. My heart is obviously for businesses to grow in this town, but I hate to do it at the expense of residential property.
Okay. Frank?
I kind of agree with Tom. I think it does conform with the conservation and development in the town after studying it immensely. Peter's thoughts and Walter's thoughts and, about at the expense of residential, I mean, it's a portion of Route 1. There are some impacted. There are going to be some impacts. We can't know who's going to go there. It's, that comes with an approval, not a denial. And I think that, we have say in a lot of it. So I definitely would not vote to deny this seat.
Okay. David?
I think I would vote to deny it purely in the sense that I think it ought to be part of a bigger and broader planning discussion, which is already anticipated and in fact scheduled to take place when you look at the TS2 zones where it exists right now. It largely is along the frontage of the post road, and this parcel, because of the anomaly of just its shape being so deep, is reaching relatively far off of the post road. I listened to the applicant talk about frontage and visibility, and I think, well, that's going to be great for the guy who gets the front lot, but everybody else is going to be relatively further off the road, and I'm not entirely confident and comfortable that the idea of putting all of those different uses that are permitted in the TS2 that far into what either is existing residential or is potentially additional residential land. I mean, I envision the Route 1 West essentially talking about how deep do we want to develop off of the post road, and I can't imagine that the correct answer to that, with the exception of this notion of the MUC1, was that we wanted to reach that far off of the post road and that far into residential neighborhoods with 26 to 27 potential uses, many of which are purely site plan, which means you can't regulate the hours, you can't regulate the traffic, you can't regulate a whole bunch of things if it's just site plan. And I think, if a restaurant's going to go in there and people are going to be hearing it until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we can't control that because it's a special permit, because it's a site plan, that strikes me as being poor planning on our part. And I think we are trying to plan. We are working proactively on that, but I'd like to be given the opportunity to do that.
I think that one of this commission's main jobs is to protect residents from major externalities created by, negative externalities created by other residents. In this case, I agree with the applicant that Route 1 is a great location for an agricultural store or a national chain or any of many other uses that this applicant may choose to sell or rent its property for. That, according to the applicant, would be about 4 acres in this case. The other 31 are a big question mark. And the other 31 also are likely to produce a net expense for the town in terms of the residents that could develop there. They also will produce a net expense in terms of services and the environmental impacts in that area as written by several different organizations that we very, very seldom hear from, are possibly very significant. Now, this applicant should have the right to do what they want with their property to a large extent. It seems that R7 zoning might not be making enough money. And certainly the Route 1 section of that property development is a very valid idea. And that doesn't get me anywhere near 35 acres, and the uses that they've discussed don't get me anywhere near TS2, which is sort of a dumping ground of our zoning regulations, in the sense that we pile uses that could have very significant ugly externalities for others into this type of zone. And that's why I actually brought up this prospective use of it as well. We're trying to protect the town from very negative uses by piling additional uses into this specific zone. If we decide to push this zone out to this spot, we're really creating a lot of question marks for ourselves, and we're very likely to burn ourselves across 5, 10, 20, even 40 or 50 years, since it's very rare that we roll back zoning in any way.
Well, certainly the applicant has a right to ask for this. There's no question about it. I think it does conform with the plan of conservation development. It's hard to argue that there isn't going to be commercial development here. There's a large MUC1, I think, zone across the street from it, which is quite deep. And then I think further down, there's an MUC2 that goes right up to 95, I believe. So, I mean, the precedent has been set. We also have the rock pile, which goes in a little ways. So I'm not so concerned about that. Also, I don't think the fact that we, meaning the commission, the town, put those uses in the zone should be held against the applicant. The applicant's got every right to ask for that and every right to ask for those uses. Now, it's true that we don't know exactly what's going to go there. And the fact is, we won't know until they get approval to do something, and then the market will probably determine what actually goes in there. The property's been there for many years. It's been there as an R7. It's never been developed, so that's telling me that that perhaps isn't the best use of the property here. And while I understand there's a Route 1 West study coming down the pike, the problem I have is we're not clear when that's going to take, how long that's going to take, and what the results are going to be. As I said, the applicant feels that this is the best use for the property, and in this area, I don't really see a problem. I think they haven't gone for the whole parcel. They've only gone to the front half. There are some uses that are permitted as of right, so there'll be site plan review, but they will still have to conform to all the zoning regulations. So it's not like they're just going to go willy-nilly and do whatever they want. The zoning regulations that exist must be followed and adhered to, otherwise we will not grant the site plan. So in this case, I'm for the application. So that's where I come out. Bottom line is, I guess we're ready for a vote, unless there's any other discussion.
This is a vote to deny.
That's right.
This is a vote to deny.
Without prejudice.
Right. Okay, so all in favor of denying the application without prejudice? Okay, all in favor of all in favor
Nay to
of
denial.
denying the motion to deny the application? Okay, so we have 3 and 3. I think in a situation like that,
We have to make the other motion, correct? Someone now needs to make a motion for approval.
Well, it's been,
The
it
motion-
hasn't been approved,
No.
let's put that much. It's
The
not
motion
been
to
approved.
deny failed because of a tie vote.
right, so that failed. So can I get another motion then?
I'll read it. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a zoning map revision for Sullivan Farm LLC, map 83, lot 5, to change the approximately 35-acre parcel from R7 to TS2, as shown on a map prepared by the applicant dated 7/3/13, with yellow line showing area of proposed change, and is heard at a public hearing on September 4th, 2013. This zoning revision is approved based upon a finding that is consistent with the plan of conservation and development. The revision is to be effective on September 13th, 2013.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on this?
Well, I would just like, to say again that I think that the testimony has been very clear about this being consistent with the plan of conservation and development. I think there's been testimony to the fact that that this would be, if there are any places left in Guilford where there would be space for decent commercial development, this would be one of the prime places. We also are aware of the fact that this town is overwhelmingly dependent on personal property taxes to pay for the services the town's providing. In fact, I think Guilford right now only has 6% of their, I think it's 6 or 8% of their personal property taxes coming from commercial development.
Personal property taxes?
Real estate property taxes, I'm sorry, right. Real estate property taxes. It's something less than 10%. So I see this as a good effort for the town of Guilford, and I think it would be, in the long run, it would be, could be done it's got to come back to us every time somebody wants to put something in there. It's going to be done appropriately with the right sewers and all of that stuff, which would happen with the site plan, and therefore I'm supporting this change.
Okay, is there anybody else I've basically said what I had to say, so I have nothing new to add. Does anybody else have anything new to add? All right, well, let's call for a vote on this. All in favor of the motion approving the application? Okay, all those opposing it? Okay, anybody abstaining?
I'm going to abstain.
All right, so we got
Succeed.
3.
If you abstained, it wouldn't have passed.
3 to 3 means that it fails.
Right, so it's 3 for, 1 abstention, and 2 against, so it passes. Okay. Moving on, we have
Did you vote to, did you continue the public hearing on those other two items?
Yes.
Officially, okay.
Okay. Well, we didn't open it yet, but, so we'll just continue it to the next. Okay.
Let the record show that.
Well, we'll just do it.
Yeah, do that.
Can I get a motion to continue the amend 273-2 word usage definitions to the next meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And can I also get a motion to amend Table 5 permitted uses in non-residential districts to the next meeting? Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, campsite plans. Deborah Weedy, property located at 116 Seaside Avenue, Cam. Site plan approval to replace an existing shed within 100 feet of the critical coastal resource. Receive and set a public hearing for October 2nd.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Special permit for Russell Cooper, property located 350 Weatherly Trail. Special permit for a structure over 750 square feet. Receive and set a public hearing for October 2nd.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay, zoning regulation amendments, amend 273-21C, add in addition the bulk storage and retail sale of propane on parcels of land containing less than 4 acres in area and located west of Westlake Avenue and south of US Route 1 in the CD zone is permitted. Receive and set a public hearing for October 16, 2013.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Westlake.
Planning Committee, 9/17/13, Selectmen's Meeting Room at 5:15. Zoning Committee, we have to determine a date for that.
I don't think we're gonna have a
for.
we're not gonna have a planning committee meeting either.
Okay, so we're going to just postpone that one.
But we are gonna work on we do have a Route 1 West committee.
Okay.
He has volunteered to serve as zoning committee chair if you're looking.
Oh, good, okay. I'll take you up on that offer. So we have a new chair, and now we just need to get the members there. Shore Publishing, $306.34.
Pay the bill.
Second, all in favor? Okay, we have the minutes of the August
We have to
12,
have a zoning.
2013 meeting. Oh, I'm sorry.
Remember that guy with that reg that he wants changed?
Right.
What is
We have to have a
And that's
zoning
next
meeting.
Monday.
We have to have a zoning meeting.
Well, Grigsby's now the new chair.
So why do we have to have one?
Because we have somebody that's coming from the public with a request
And we
to make
voted
an
last
amendment.
time.
What's it about?
We were supposed to have a hearing last month and
Well, who is
meeting
on the
evaporated.
zoning committee at this point? I know I'm there, and
I am, but it occurs at 5 o'clock. I don't make it back to town until about 6:15.
so that's not going to work. So who else is on zoning committee?
I am, I'm in charge of it, remember?
Well, I mean, usually go to those as well. I've missed a few, but I usually go to.
Kim was, but guess that's it.
She was the only person left on the commission, on that committee.
Are those who are not assigned to it allowed to vote if they're present?
Well, no, we got to be
You
appointed.
don't really vote either.
You don't vote, I mean, none of the votes.
you make
Committee doesn't-
recommendations to
Committee
the
doesn't really
commission.
We're, the problem is, we're down so many members.
When
it's
does it
been hard.
meet?
It's at 5 o'clock in Town Hall South. My
What
office-
days
in our
usually?
office. On next Monday, the second Monday of the month.
Monday the 9th.
It'll be Monday the 9th at 5. In that little conference
Okay, well,
room.
why don't we do this? David will be
you have to
there,
appoint
I'll
them?
be there, and we're going to, is there anyone who can participate at that time? They'll be appointed a member of the zoning committee for the purposes of this meeting. Frank, can you make it?
So that
I'm
agenda's
gonna
gotta
see.
go out.
Okay.
It's not a big deal if people.
I'll make
are
it.
there or
Well,
not.
okay, so whoever can show up, please make it for this one.
When is it,
Yes, we
September?
have some recommendations.
And we'll just send out a notice to everyone, an email notice to remind people when it is.
Can
All
we
right.
get a draft of what he's asking for as well?
Yes, he wants to make some changes to the lot coverage requirements for certain zones.
All right,
It's logical what he's requesting.
all right, we'll hear him out at the meeting.
Yeah.
Shore Publishing, a bill for $306.30, oh, I'm sorry, we already did that. We have approval of the August 21st, 2013 minutes. They had gone out, so I'll ask, is there any changes, updates,
Hold on, let me just look.
modifications? I've already reviewed them, and I am okay with it as is.
Yeah, she was there.
Spell it right.
Done, I'm leaving this.
All right.
This is extra.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review these, or? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I vote we approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Any discussion, changes, updates? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, having no more business, I'll call for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.